There's a couple members of our team that might be listening in.
Okay. The reason why I ask is when we have an opportunity for public comment,
Okay.
so we kind of monitor to see who's coming and going
Yeah.
virtually, but I didn't know if you knew of anyone.
As a courtesy, I let my two architects know that this was happening.
Okay.
That's all.
Brian, why don't you start?
Sitting on the end has its advantages. Brian Markham, Engineering Commission.
Hi there, Shirin Masudi at Large Commission.
Molly Spitalnik, Urban Design Commissioner.
Good morning. My name is Caitlin Frong. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
And Gist, Architect Commissioner.
Good morning, I'm Kevin O'Neill. I'm the Transportation Planning Commissioner and Acting Chair.
Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Ray Gastel, Planning Commissioner.
Okay. And I'm Charlie Torres. I'm the state project manager for this. I work in the terminal engineering side, not to be confused with the vessel engineering side. We just manage the terminals.
And I'm Laura Labissonere Miller, and I'm leading community engagement. I work as part of the consultant team with Washington State Ferries.
I'm Taylor Page. I'm part of the Jacobs team, also part of the consultant team, the project manager, helping WFF the planning stage. Do we want anyone online?
I think so. I think Kate, did you? I think she's locked on.
And then we don't want any of the rest of the team.
Oh,
Something really quick before we start. We've talked and I had said that we might not take a vote, but after talking about it, we thought it would be good to endorse here the alternative, just for the record. So we are going to take for the pre-concept phase is what we're going to call it, right? Okay.
and we have you till 11, so.
Where do I begin? I'm looking at the big screen there.
Yeah.
So I'll say thanks for, I'm just glad this group exists and that you can have opportunities to let us know, what do you think? What do you, I want to see frowny faces. Like, no, that doesn't work for us. And that helps because I get a lot of recommendations from lots of other groups, including my agency. And sometimes I just shake my head and say, it's hard to balance all this out. I got the tribe saying this, I have the neighbor saying this, I have the Southworth folks saying this. So I do like hearing what planners or landscape architects in this group have to say about the project. It's useful to me in guiding the project forward. All right. We're going to talk about what's there today. From my perspective, I always like to look at the third dimension, what's in the earth, what's underneath there. That's really as important as what you see from the surface. But I'm going to try and tell you everything that's there today. And later on, we'll talk about our community engagement. Laura's going to lead that part, and Taylor's going to help with the screening process. All the alternatives we considered, a whole bunch, and how we ended up where we're at today. There's a little, we peeled off a piece of the project, called the signalized intersection project. That's being handled separately. Later on this year, it'll go to construction. We'll talk about that and then our steps forward. So here's our little ferry terminal built in the 1950s. I don't know who was around back then. We use timber. We use creosote treated timbers. Cool stuff. It lasts a long time. It only went down 25 feet into the water. So seismically, it doesn't meet any of our today's design criteria. Time, I guess it's at risk in a significant earthquake. It's at risk of collapsing the trestle anyway. We're going to talk a little bit about sea level rise over here. Currently, this terminal is 2 feet lower than the two terminals across the water, Southworth and Vashon. So you'll see a picture here. I think it's taken in December. You can see the water comes right up to the bottom of today's trestle, and we need to hang utilities on the side or underneath the trestle. So it's not a good thing today. And then if you factor in sea level rise, we need to do even more. That's a long way of saying this trestle, the future trestle is going to be a bit higher. We'll talk about traffic along Fauntleroy Way. This is an odd terminal because there's two destinations and the capacity of the vessels is 124 cars, but we can only stage 80 or 84 cars on the dock going to two destinations. So it's a trick. It's magic what the operations staff does to make it work. You can say, well, it's working fine today. They would say, no, it's not. We're doing a lot of things that are not safe, but you do it so that we can meet the schedule. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And I mentioned that it's just an aging structure and it's time to replace it.
Teams is still a little slow. You can probably keep chatting, Charlie, and the slides will
Okay.
move when they move.
Here we go. So we started this project just before COVID. And I remember my boss telling me, we're not going to take 10, 20 years to design this project like we did your Mukilteo project. Like, no, we're going to do this one really quick. And I just nodded and said, sure, we will. Because I know things happen. I didn't know COVID was going to happen. I didn't know the West Seattle Bridge was going to start cracking. I didn't know all these other things. But things just happen on all these projects. As long as I've worked, stuff happens. So we want to go quickly. And we can only go as fast as we can go. Before I started COVID, before COVID happened and we began the project, we did put this long range plan together. And this is what the team aims at. So we did these, we figured out what vessels were going to be assigned to the route in 2040. We did our traffic predictions of what traffic would be like in South Kitsap, over in Vashon, and in West Seattle. And then we took that information and we gave it to this design team and said, this is what you're aiming at. Not 2050, not 2090, 2040, just aim there. We really, things get fuzzy if you start looking further ahead than that. Even though the structures we're putting in here made of steel and concrete, they're going to last 50 to 75 years. Our design is based on the 2040 long range plan. Continue. So we started out in meeting with the public when we told them everything's on the table. Give us all your ideas. And when you do that, you get some great ideas. And then you get ideas where you roll your eyes and say, I don't think so. But like, thanks for your ideas. Move it all the way south into Burien or Des Moines or further and move it all the way up north to Coleman Dock and eliminate the terminal. But some of them were really good ideas that we've captured. And then Taylor's going to tell you more about this, how we screened them down, level 1 screening, level 2 screening. And we finally got to where we are now, where that yellow we are here is. We're finishing up a report with an alternative that we're going to advance into NEPA. That starts later on this year after the summer. And we're just going to study what happens if this alternative, like how does it look through the NEPA lens? And then we'll find out. It doesn't mean we're going to build that. Probably something similar to that. That begins, it's supposed to be a 12-month process. I put in 2 years because there's a ramp up period and a ramp down period before we get into design and construction or final design and construction. Okay. So I like this perspective. To the immediate north, as you look over the water, you're looking west, and this is just on the north side of the trestle. There's a large King County sewage lift station. And then next to that is this little sliver of park, call it Cove Park. You can barely see the trail that comes from the sidewalk on the right. And one thing that's great about, I think, ferry terminals is that in the summertime when we have really low tide, you can go underneath them and see sea stars and anemones and mussels and all sorts of marine critters. Sometimes the folks from the aquarium they have docents and they're walking the kids around. Sometimes the teachers want to bring their kids around, and it's just a fun place to go. It'd be funner if there wasn't any creosote on all these pilings, but that's what the nearshore environment looks like, and that is a big driver of what we're advancing with the NEPA. People can talk about traffic and these other things. That first one there, intertidal and nearshore habitats, is a big deal. Okay. Fauntleroy Creek, it comes out, it approaches from the south side of the dock, and today it decides to come under the trestle and exit. You can see it there if you squint. The creek is coming out on the north side today, but as the years go on, material accumulates on the beach and it just finds another way to get into the Puget Sound. I mentioned the creosote timbers. It's really great wiping out a terminal and just wiping out all that creosote and putting it in a landfill. Little by little, I feel like we're making some improvements on the health of the Puget Sound. Cove Park, we're looking at Cove Park, and there's right at the intersection up on the bluff, away from the water side is a little bench and a little park area. That's Cove Park. That's part of this too. We'll talk about that later. Okay, I mentioned the creek coming through on the south side, and that today comes underneath the trestle. A couple of things which are unnatural, and we've been asked, and it makes sense to us to try and correct them as part of this project, besides removing the creosote. There's this big accumulation of debris. That beach area is very unnatural. You won't find that anywhere else in West Seattle. And that giant scour hole where the vessel fits in, if you follow the contour lines, you'll see it's just a self-dredging thing. Those lines wouldn't be like that if it wasn't for the vessel blowing all this material, and it blows onto the eelgrass. And we didn't pay for the eelgrass survey to continue further up and further down, but it is a ribbon that goes all along the shallow part of the Puget Sound. Tribes have told us, think of it as a ribbon of gold, and be careful if you mess with that ribbon. It's really, really important to them and to the health of the Puget Sound. So a big part of our decision to take this alternative and move it forward. What else do I want to tell you? Okay, you can see the King County lift station, barely, big white box to the north of the trestle by the street. King County Metro picks up and drops off people right out there on Fauntleroy Way. There's also 240, 260 kids every morning and afternoon that come and use this terminal on their way to school on Vashon Island. And we have nice homes around there. It's a little quiet area. I mentioned Cove Park is right there on the opposite side of the street, the east side of the street, up on top of the bluff. Captain's Park. And this one, and I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thanks, Charlie, for setting the stage and the context. And we are going to get into the alternative that Washington State Ferries has selected to move forward. But before that, I wanted to just speak a little bit about the community engagement process so far. Charlie mentioned that this route serves 3 communities, so 3 million passengers who travel through the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal each year. Those communities are very different from one another and have really different needs. So we're serving Vashon Island, which is an island dependent entirely on the ferry system to get to medical appointments, work, places that they need to go. They rely on that service. And we hear from them loud and clear. We hear a lot from them and do a lot of work with the community. We're also serving the South Kitsap Peninsula, so an increasingly diverse area, a lot of people moving out to that area, a lot more, we really see the ridership increasing from South Kitsap Peninsula and coming into Seattle and going kind of a split between south and north. So they're coming to Fauntleroy, but they're going in all directions. And then of course, as Charlie, mentioned with the environment around the terminal. This is in the middle of a residential neighborhood. This is the only terminal in the system that the connection is a local arterial. And so, you know, you think about the neighborhood and people currently that have traffic, you know, coming along in front of their homes. There's driveways that are along Fauntleroy Way, and you know, people, this neighborhood, the terminal has really become part of the fabric of the community and a part of the neighborhood. So our engagement process over the last several years through the planning study, we have done a lot of work with all three of these communities. We've held bigger community meetings, so 8 community meetings. We've heard from, at this point, over 1,000 people who provided their feedback during the planning process. So, you know, we got input on looking at a variety of different places where we could look to move the terminal, really hearing about the needs of the people who rely on the service and who are neighbors with Washington State Ferries. We held online open houses. As Charlie mentioned, this is really kind of peak COVID times. So we had a lot of virtual engagement. And then we convened 3 advisory groups, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, but we've met with those groups 32 times during the planning study. And this graphic here really just shows the different types of audiences that we've engaged. So we have an executive advisory group that's made up of elected officials. We have our technical group that is agency partners representing all the various agencies that have a strong interest in this project. We've had that tribal input through both government to government consultation and also involvement within our advisory groups. They participate in both the executive advisory group as well as the technical advisory group. And then we have a community advisory group that has been very helpful in the process, and we've met with them many times and representing all of the 3 communities as well as different interests. So we've got, you know, school parents who go over to Vashon for school. There's about 300 high school students that commute every day to go to Vashon School District. So that's a big audience. We also have neighbors that live near the terminal, but also folks in West Seattle that are part of the broader West Seattle community. And then a few living within the South Kitsap Peninsula. And we've heard, as you might imagine, really different things from each of these 3 groups. So from the Southworth and South Kitsap Peninsula, and as well as Vashon, we've heard a lot of interest in a larger dock and really prioritizing efficient loading and reliable service. They're looking at, you know, what are all of the ways that we can make the most of this facility to be as efficient as we can, and really increasing that accessibility as well, making it easier for people who are walking, biking, to get where they need to go. The folks in Fauntleroy, the neighbors, are, you know, they're really looking to preserve their neighborhood and want to maintain that character. So we've heard a lot of, you know, early input on terminal aesthetics, what the terminal could look like and feel like in their neighborhood, how it could blend in to the community. And then, as you know, Charlie talked about Cove Park, so that's been a really important feature that's beloved by the community. There's a lot of people who use that, who come down to the waterfront, as well as the creek. There's a lot of interest in preserving the creek and just the natural environment around the terminal. And you know, I guess the last thing I'll just say is that this is really just the beginning of the engagement process. This is something that will, you know, continue as the project moves forward, and there will be a lot of opportunities to continue working with everyone who uses the terminal and who lives nearby as the project moves into the design phase, and then start having conversations about both environmental review and getting their input during that process, and then design and eventually construction. Hey, I think Kayla's going to talk next about our screening process and the alternative.
Thank you. So as Charlie mentioned, we have gone through a PEL process, which is the planning and environmental linkages process. So this helps us identify any transportation issues, any environmental concerns, community values, and anything else that might be important to the project. So as a part of that, Washington State Ferries evaluated all of the alternatives in 3 phases or 3 screenings. So in that level 1 screening, we had other alternatives at other locations. Charlie mentioned all the way north, further south, and ended up eliminating any of the alternatives that were at other locations, so that as we went into that level 2 screening, all of the alternatives were then at the current site where the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal is now. And coming out of the level 2 screening, the 2 main concepts that then progressed were to either have a similar dock size, so in that 80 to 84 car range, or a larger dock size. And there is some guidance on the size of the dock, the terminal design manual, which, as Charlie mentioned, he's a part of the terminal engineering group. And so one of the references that we often look at when designing is the terminal design manual. And that advises sizing a terminal, or specifically the dock, to hold about 1.5 times the capacity of the vessel. So here we have a Issaquah class ferry that holds 124 vehicles, give or take a little. And so that would put us in that 186 type range. So we're looking at alternatives anywhere from the current of 80 to 84 to 186. So just gives you a bit of an idea of why there is an appetite to increase the size of it. It is quite undersized, both operationally, as Charlie mentioned, and the design guides. So in our level 3 screening, we then broke that apart a little bit and looked at different alternatives, somewhat based on dock size, but also on the configuration of their designs. There were a few, as you can kind of see, color coded there, that were the similar dock size, and then a various range there increasing in size for those larger dock options. And as a part of that, I'll also just mention that there were also a couple alternatives that we looked at as part of a good to go and advanced ticketing study. So similar to the tolling technologies that you see used around the state by WashDOT, we looked at what would it look like if we had some sort of tolling technology utilized at the terminal. Okay, so moving into our level 3 screening, we landed on drum roll.
We're waiting.
We landed on progressing into NEPA an alternative that was based on what we called our B alternative. So we had alternatives A, A1, A2, A3, alternative B, B1, and alternative C. And so we decided to progress the B alternative footprint. And the reason we're talking about it as a footprint here is that that's combining a couple of those B alternatives. They're fairly similar, as you can see by the outline there. They had a lot of similarities and they performed pretty similarly in that level 3 screening. So yeah, the idea here is that we'll carry that footprint forward into the NEPA phase. And what we've learned in our level 3 screening from the various analyses and studies that we've done is the areas into which we can more easily expand. So here you can see that is primarily a lengthening of the trestle for the reasons that Charlie explained, that by pushing the end of the trestle out further, by moving those berthing structures into deeper water, you actually prevent a lot of the environmental damage that can happen from that propeller wash. And it gives us an opportunity to restore some of the eelgrass damage that has occurred over time around the trestle. By lengthening rather than widening, we can minimize any of the impacts to Cove Park, which is that little park to the north that Charlie was pointing out. By going through some of the assessments through the level 3 screening, we're also more aware of the various right-of-way parcels and things like that. So we try to minimize land acquisitions or parcel acquisitions. And in general, we're moving forward with the footprint that best improves operational efficiency, as well as some of the other factors which I'll get into in a moment here. So as I mentioned, those B alternatives that we're basing the footprint on are fairly similar. By the time we get to level 3 screening, a lot of the screening criteria and performance factors that we were looking at are all met across all of the alternatives. Level 1, level 2, we've already screened out a lot of the things that have critical flaws. So all of the alternatives that we looked at, and certainly what we're progressing forward into NEPA, meets some of these key needs. So that is to replace the dock at the same location, accommodate the number of vehicles that is requested by the design manual. So that is in a combination of on dock and shoulder holding up Fauntleroy Way as it is currently. The new design will meet the seismic design standards, accommodate sea level rise. It will be designed to have enough space for large trucks to safely navigate. At the moment, it's quite tight. The lanes are quite narrow, and when large trucks come through, it can be quite a maneuvering challenge for operations and drivers. We'll have wider lanes that gives more space for various modes of moving across the trestle. Gives more space for operations, a new terminal building. There'll be drop-off and pick-up areas for passengers with mobility challenges, a larger toll plaza with 2 toll booths, and again, minimizing any widening at the shoreline to prevent impacts to that nearshore environment that Charlie was mentioning. Okay, and so digging into some of the specifics of the level 3 screening, this gives you a bit of a taste for some of the screening criteria and performance factors that we looked at in level 3. Now, a lot of these carry over from our level 1 and level 2 screenings. This is based on the performance and need, the purpose and need that was developed for the project. There are a lot more criteria than this. There are 31 performance factors in total. I believe 13 screening criteria. As I said, because by the time we got to level 3, a lot of them are meeting a lot of the criteria. We just kind of baked that into the design. What we're showing here is just the criteria that actually allowed us to differentiate between the alternatives, because for a lot of them, they just meet all of the requirements. So some of the ones you don't see here that I think you might be interested in are that they all improve connectivity to transit, avoid temporary and permanent impacts to the nearby parks, reduce conflicts between vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. One that you can see here, might be hard with the glare, but it's the 5th one down, is the distance for people to walk, bike, or roll from the intersection with Fauntleroy Way onto the ferry. Obviously, that's something we considered by lengthening the trestle. We want to be mindful of what that does for various for people who are traveling in various ways. And while the length of the trestle is going to be up to around 250 feet longer, the grade is significantly improved. So as Charlie mentioned, to meet the projected sea level rise, we're raising the end of the trestle. At the moment, you may or may not have noticed in the photos, there's quite a dip and it's quite steep. So by raising it by the few feet that we have to at the end there, we improve that grade. WSF is also considering adding bump outs and benches along there, regardless of that additional length, just because it does help folks who are making the walk down there, may want to pull off and look at the beautiful scenery. And so there's a few things that we're doing there to both mitigate and improve some of that traveling down the length of the trestle. Okay, I think that are the main points I'd share on that. As I said, in the NEPA phase, we'll refine this footprint further, minimizing impact to any of those environmentally sensitive areas. We'll have the opportunity to restore some of the eelgrass, and we'll be looking at a dock that holds between 124 to 155 vehicles. That's based on all of the screening criteria that we just looked at, but also included traffic analysis. We ran visim models of each of these alternatives, which is a traffic model just to see how the vehicles of various modes load and unload, also considering kind of the lane configurations and how they're sort on the trestle. Yes, that's some of the key features of what we're progressing. And then as part of this, as Charlie mentioned, we identified the opportunity to improve the intersection. That intersection is at the terminal entrance and where it connects to Fauntleroy Way Southwest. As Laura mentioned, it is an arterial street. There are neighbors along there with the driveways that drop out into Fauntleroy Way. Currently, that is an unsignalized, uncontrolled intersection. WSF does have a uniformed police officer out there during peak periods, sometimes just to help direct that traffic, because you have people leaving the terminal wanting to go both left and right, north and south. A lot of school kids, there are buses that come through there. So we will be installing a signalized intersection beginning later this year. That design is currently about 60%. We're working closely with both Washington State Ferries, their washed-up traffic contingent, SDOT, and the various departments at SDOT. That will be a single signal pole with a couple mast arms on it. We've designed it to avoid the hillside that you see there with Captain's Park on top. That was one of the key aims with the project, to avoid any impacts to parks. There's also culturally sensitive areas around here, so just minimizing that. And with that design, we are balancing the needs, not just of the terminal, its operations and its customers, but also the other stakeholders around there. So the neighbors, again, we don't want really long pulse of traffic coming out from the terminal, but then people can't get out of their driveways. We want to think about the other modes traveling through, people walking, biking, rolling through traffic on Fauntleroy Way. There are businesses further to the south and around the bend. The buses, we want to make sure that we're able to keep them on schedule. And I think that's all I would say about that.
I'll add that the intersection is owned by the city and it will be managed by the city. We're using their design criteria and they're reviewing our submittals. Just want to fit in with how the city wants to manage traffic along Fauntleroy Way. I'll also add on the modes, the trestle really gets longer as opposed to wider, but the little widening has to do with the 2 bike lanes that we're adding. Currently, the bike lanes go in and out of the exit lanes. And sometimes people are using the exit lanes to drop off somebody that needs to get to the front, a walk-on that has to get to the front. So there's cars going back and forth in that exit lane. And then there could be bikes going back and forth on the exit lanes, and there could be motorcycles going back and forth on the exit lanes. And we've probably had a few close calls, and that's something that we just said, that's not right. Let's give a dedicated bike lane to enter, and let's have a dedicated bike lane to exit. So there we've added on 8 or 10 feet, just right there. And we're not going to let the motorcycles go back and forth in the exiting lanes. We're going to give them their own entry lane to queue up as well. So that's about 15 feet wider, just to accommodate those 2 extra modes. Yeah, we think it's the right thing to do. Safety was a big issue that we talked about. Just that's our justification for widening it a little bit. It's not just because we want to put more cars on the dock.
Yeah, that's a good point. That safety being a big driver, and with that updated configuration, all of the lanes, the holding lanes, do get a little bit wider to better accommodate ADA vehicles and other vehicle types, and just generally make that sorting and staging much safer.
Yeah, Taylor mentioned, or somebody mentioned 124 to 155 cars. So 124, the magic number there that's the capacity of the vessel. We found out that if you had that much in front of on the other side of the tow booth already prepaid, it's really efficient. If you doubled it, it doesn't make it any more efficient. If you tripled it, it doesn't make it any more efficient. The model doesn't show it. But having 124 cars, bless you, having 124 cars or so is like really good to make it efficient. The 155, where that comes from, the additional vehicles is half of a lane, and it's for cars you want to sort. So emergency vehicles, ambulances and whatnot, ADA folks, sometimes they request when they get on the boat to be parked next to the elevator so that they can go upstairs and enjoy the ride like everyone else. Maybe van pools can go in there. Just operations have told us, we don't need the whole lane, but we want to be able to put, half a dozen cars sort out in that extra lane if you can get us one more lane. And we're mindful that we don't want to widen near the shore, in the eelgrass. So that extra half lane, if it happens, will be on the outer end of the dock. But that's the reason for it. It's not to get cars off the street. It's the operations folks said, we really need to be able to put 4, 6, 8 cars just off on the side, and there's no place to put them.
Really want to wrap us up?
All right. So this report that we've been working on, we thought it would be done in 2 years. Took about twice as long. We are finishing up this July. I mean, it's just a draft form now. We're just doing the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We work with FHWA, and we've become good friends with the staff there, and we're nervous for our partners, like what's going to happen with them. So it could be another hiccup, but we've partnered with them. We've met with them every 2 months for this whole process, making sure they are watching us, mindful of what we're doing. So the understanding is that they're going to sign off on this report, because it's not like they haven't been part of this whole process. Secures funding. Money is there's never enough money. Well, I shouldn't say never. Some of my projects have enough money, but usually they don't. You usually have to go back to the legislature and say, can I have a few more dollars. And construction of the intersection, it will finish design in July-ish. So I think in November they might be mobilizing, and they'll work in the winter. November, December, January, they'll be working in that intersection. And then we're getting ready. After that, we'll do the NEPA chapter. I said a year or two, and then we're ready to do the final design and construction. That's my crystal ball. That's what I think is going to happen. I didn't get to talk about the cool stuff, like the building, like what's the building going to look like, or what the walkway, or all that fun stuff that people mention in some of our meetings. And I hate telling them, can you hold off? Because that's what they're interested in. That's what I'm interested in too. It's important, and it's the stuff that sometimes when we have these budget issues, they said, oh, all that nice stuff, just like forget it. Like, no. So maybe you can help us. Maybe you can help us push back and say, we can't just forget it. We need to have it.
You'll be back to us at another time for that conversation.
Yeah.
Well, and today we will talk about it, but knowing that we're really early.
Yeah. And let me just throw out that the building that you probably couldn't see, the terminal building out there, it's about 2,500 square feet, and it is packed. If you ever go into their closet areas, it's sad. They'll have like all the pillows and all the sheets here, and then they'll have like a little hot water container where they boil their water and make their tea during their breaks. They need more space. So what they're supposed to get as part of this project is something almost twice the size. So think 4,700 square feet. What's that going to look like? Not 2,500.
Thank you so much. We do have an opportunity. We always provide the opportunity for public comment. It doesn't appear that anyone from the general public is attending, but there are 2 people from the city, and we'd like to hear from them if they have any particular comments.
Tracy Rector is there.
Omar Akari and Ben Perkowski. Did either of you have any comment before the commission pivots to the question? If you could raise your hand if you have any comment. We'll come back to you before the end of the session at 11 today. Thanks, Omar. Did you have any up to 2 minutes of comment?
No, it was just good to see the background, and I hadn't been included yet in the process, and so I just emailed your website email to make sure I get included in the future. So I'm the land manager, so my crews maintain Cove Park. I assume the ferry terminal is going to do what it's going to do, and King County Pump Station will be looped in on all this stuff as well. I hadn't heard them mentioned in the presentation as much. But just looking forward to seeing the actual design stuff. I'm a landscape architect, and so I manage that. And so I'm, excited to see what you guys can do surrounding the project and what the impacts. I'm actually curious what the impacts are, if any, to those other sites. So thank you. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Omar. Thanks. Dan?
Hi, yeah, I'm Ben Prokowski. I'm a land use planner at STCI and shoreline code specialist, so would be looking at the shoreline permitting for this most likely. But one question I just had is, how much coordination has happened yet with like Department of Fish and Wildlife or Army Corps about the impacts and mitigation, if any? Has that already occurred, or how much of that has occurred?
In our outreach, we have 3 groups. We have an citizen advisory group, technical advisory group, and an elected group as well. And they're under the technical advisory groups. So when Laura flashed the number of meetings, we've had a number. Most of the meetings are with the citizens advisory group, but we have had quite a few with the technical advisory groups, and that's where they came in. They were very aware of the scour hole. They had a strong opinion of what we could do. It would be a shame if you had a project and you didn't address that issue. So we've met with them, WDFW, Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, and there's one more. And ecology. So yeah, we keep them in the loop. They're very, very helpful.
Yeah, I'm familiar with lots of big projects like this, and I just know that the mitigation issue it's really good to get all the agencies on board as soon as possible on what the mitigation possibilities are, or prior to permit applications if possible. And for something like this, it's definitely an increase in overwater coverage, that is going to trigger mitigation through the shoreline code, regardless of Army Corps or DFW. So I have to stress that regardless of what Army Corps or DFW says, there's still going to be mitigation requirements per the shoreline code and hopefully it all works out that it's, one mitigation package works for everybody in general. But I just have to mention that we don't necessarily defer to DFW exclusively or Army Corps. So that's something to be aware of. So that we will want to be talking to you about the mitigation possibilities and just very, super preliminary. I would imagine that the mitigation here could go beyond just the potential restoration of some eelgrass areas, given the large amount of overwater impacts and in-water impacts the piling underneath the new area. So that would be my initial thought, is that the mitigation is going to be probably larger than just the eelgrass work. So that I'm not making a decision at all right now, but I would just be willing to bet that that's true.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate the comment in the background. I'm sure commissioners do as well. If anyone else who's attending wants to make up to 2 minutes of public comment, if you could raise your hand, we'll go ahead and start with commissioner questions. We do have a hard stop at 11 because our action taker needs to leave and we have a second item, so just bear that in mind. And I will go to
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation. So we will be taking an action today and provide you some recommendations from the group today, so share what's important to us. We have some different discussion categories that we've outlined. So the first is overall project and goals. Second is integration with the surrounding context and user experience of the open space, recreation, views, multimodal connections. The third is civic expression. Fourth is equity. Fifth is natural environment and sustainability. And right now, I think what we're going to do is start with Brian to ask some questions of you. And we're going to try to keep our questions closed-ended. And this is primarily for me. I've already been noted. So if we don't expand on the questions, so kind of yes, no, or quick answers to the questions so we get onto the discussion portion of the presentation. Thank you. Brian? I'm mostly interested in how this changes the weighting up Fauntleroy on the road. So if we put more people on the dock, does it change what the median or the sort of the side weighting zone is? Or do we expect that to, I don't know, can you comment on that?
I know it's meant to be yes, no, but just to clarify, do you mean the waiting for the folks in the queue to get onto the
Yes.
terminal or waiting for through traffic?
No, the queue. Through traffic should be separate of that.
Yes.
Yes.
So the idea is that the schedule will be the same. That's a separate effort at the moment, but they're actually looking at the triangle route schedule, but the waiting should be about the same.
So the configuration, I think, is what Taylor means, like the actual space. So there would still be a holding lane, but because there's more space on the dock, more folks would be waiting in the holding space on the ferry dock than are currently. So we expect that queue to be shorter. Is that the nature of your question?
Yeah, is there a change out in the road for that?
The backup will be far less.
Yeah.
Going at, but the bottleneck is the vessel capacity and the schedule. That's not changing. So it's just that the cars that are queued all the way up to the gas station, that line's gonna be much shorter when it gets really busy.
We're not changing the road in a
No.
reducing the sort of the shoulder areas or anything.
Nope.
What, how much does the length of the dock change? Imagine this, the further it extends into the water, the deeper the piles and foundations and the more expensive that linear feet is. Is there any limit to that or I imagine widening but nearer to shore is actually a cheaper construction.
Potentially cheaper, but much more environmentally detrimental.
Right.
Yeah. So we did consider cost as one of the factors, and you do see that with a larger trestle and longer trestle, it is more expensive, but it was the other factors, I think, that were more important in ruling out some of those larger alternatives.
Yeah. I guess my question is more around what were the other alternatives, and I don't think those were being presented to us, right?
No.
The other alternatives were as small as 80 car docks. Actually, one was 76. It got less capacity on the trestle because the toll booths were moved forward to help with the tractor trailers making the turns. So you actually, that was our smallest alternative. The footprint didn't change at all, other than widening for the bike lanes. The berthing structures remained in place and there was some cost savings there. So that was that was the one bookend. The other bookend was put 186 cars out there and you had 6 lanes. It was 6 lanes wide.
Yeah.
Right. And we didn't go beyond the 250-foot extension. After that, our berthing structures have to become floating. So we do that in Orcas Island. It's not much more expensive, but we could have gone further north, but we further out into the water. We just didn't see the need to it.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Laura, was there any type of digital survey done with the community or more of a portable way to kind of get comments, or were they all in person?
Yeah, the So we did have virtual online open houses using Washdot. There's a site that we use. And so through that, people can provide comments electronically. So that was a big part of, I think the number there was like 1,300 comments or so. And most of those were coming in through that online platform.
Was there a reason that a survey wasn't done?
It wasn't per se. I think early on, we didn't talk about necessarily a survey, but yeah, just getting comments through the website and then through the advisory groups and community meetings.
And at what point of the design, the concept would be maybe circulated in the communities to like get their feedback on it? Is there any plan?
Yeah, so we just wrapped up a round of engagement to get input on the alternative and to share out the results of the Pell study. So sharing this alternative and allowing for comments. And then as the project moves forward into NEPA, depending on the level of environmental reviews, that would, dictate we're likely looking at an environmental assessment. So there would be a public comment period or a couple of public comment periods associated with that and more opportunity to get formal input on the alternative as it moves forward.
Thank you. The other thing maybe it's just for my knowledge is during the construction, the existing dock needs to stay functional. What kind of process would it be? Because it seems like if we're replacing what's there and we're just extending what's going to happen to this route and traffic and everything that comes with that. Just wondering.
We're early in design, but we have looked at that because that question comes up a lot. Some people grimace when we tell them how long it could possibly take. Depending on how much service we provide during construction, if there was no service, like we shut down completely, a contractor can replace the thing very quickly. Just rip the whole thing out, put the whole new thing in. But that we were told that's not going to happen. That we're going to have some level of service. We don't know what that is yet. The more service you provide, the longer the project's going to take.
And the effects of that's being studied on all the communities and the neighborhood in Vashon Island.
Right. We have not made a decision, but I think people understand if you have a whole lot of service going through this construction zone, it's going to take you years and years to replace this dock. And if you say we're going to have limited service and let the contractor do the work, then it'll be a lot shorter than that. But we don't know what that level of service is that we're going to provide. We have talked about splitting it down the middle, lengthwise. And the replacement part is going to be at a different elevation. So you're going to have this new concrete deck on top of steel piling. And then down below, still in service, you'll have the existing timber trestle working. It'll have a temporary slip further out into deeper water. So you really won't be queuing many cars
very complex.
there. If you want to be there for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it just seems like we're going to have to come up to like, what's the right amount of time? What's the right amount of service that we need to provide people? Because you can't get everything you want.
Can I piggyback on that? You originally looked at alternate locations or using Coleman or some other existing facility. Is that a temporary solution?
We've thought about that maybe there's another place to bring people across. So
yeah,
absolutely, that's worth a water taxi. And we thought there could be other ways to move people back and forth. So we look forward to those conversations and what we do. But ideally, we'd like to replace this as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. It becomes more affordable if you keep a contractor out there for fewer years than more years.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly bring that contractor expertise in early to get a better idea of the phasing and how to design that on.
And can I just jump one
Sure.
further piece of that? So within the decision-making between alternatives that you shared, within the feasibility portion, was that phasing potential part of the feasibility study for for the alternatives? Was that at a later phase? Was it studied for some alternatives, for all alternatives?
Yeah, we looked at that for all of the alternatives, and it was something that we considered, both duration in construction, cost in construction, what that phasing might look like. And we do have a construction consultant working with us to work through some of those logistics and think about how that might be possible. It's pretty high level at a planning phase, but there's certainly different ways that we know are possible. And then the thought is that as we go into design, there will be very close collaboration with designers and contractors to figure out the best way to do that and think a little bit outside of the box.
My last question was, so the way that a dock works is one boat at a time is kind of working, and is that gonna be the same moving forward for the new dock? That's gonna be the same kind of way of,
Won't be a second slip.
So our team is planning on replacing the one slip with one slip. However, we know there's life after 2040, there's 2060 and 2080. So we're not going to preclude another group of citizens making the decision down the road for a second slip. But it's not part of this project. The same thing people have brought up in their review comments, not just a second slip, but overhead loading. If that would be beneficial. We haven't really studied it too much, but that could be something. So our instructions are, don't preclude any of that. That could happen, but not as part of this project.
So you're not designing the foundations or the piles or anything to support that currently?
No, but like you wouldn't want to put a whole bunch of electronics or things that have to be pulled out of the way to put another
Yes.
slip in there. We did this at Mukilteo. There's only one slip at Mukilteo, but one of these days they're going to want a second slip, and we've thought it through. The last design team thought it through, so we're going to ask this design team, think through down the road. There could be a second slip. Just keep that in the back of your mind as you design this project. There could be overhead loading. Just keep that in mind. Where would it go?
so is that because of the budget constraint, or is that because we don't anticipate that there's a need for a second one until?
The latter. We don't anticipate it, but we had limited information when this project was born. But people have been asking us, why don't you put in overhead loading? Why don't you put in a second slip? Like, okay, well, we'll look into it a little bit, but we weren't planning on it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, so you mentioned the three major communities involved. Are arrival modes being tracked for each community? So vehicular, bus, to and from, bike, ped?
That's probably you question, Charlie. So is the ferry system tracking kind of how passengers are coming through the dock? My understanding is yes, I mean, through the, ticket sales. And I know that's something that, we're using the data that was part of the long range plan. So kind of understanding like, where people are coming from and how they're getting to the ferry terminal. But yeah, do you know, Taylor, if that's something that is will influence kind of design or?
Yeah, so we've got historical data of the various modes, and what those demands are for different times of day, different days, different seasons. And that's something that WSF takes into account when putting their schedule together. So combining that with the 2040 long range plan projections, we were able to develop the traffic models to take into account what those demands would be.
Okay, great, thank you. And then has King County Metro been involved in planning to date?
Yes, yeah, so we've been meeting with them, both for, they're part of the technical advisory group for the main project, and we're also in communication with them for the intersection project. So having the bus route there, we want to make sure that we're all working together.
Okay, great. And between the alternatives that you're studying, were there clear differences in the impacts to Cove Park and to the King County site?
King County site, no, we've just constrained the footprint based on that, but to Cove Park, yes. Some of the alternatives had more of an impact on Cove Park and they were eliminated.
And what were the major impacts to Cove Park that remain with the alternatives that were shared?
So of that footprint, one of them does have a little bit more of an encroachment into Cove Park. think up to 13 feet wider, but that's part of the refinement that we'll be doing as we go into NEPA is minimizing that, and just kind of refining the shape of that footprint to avoid as much the impact of Cove Park as much as possible.
Okay, that's great. And have there been at a high, quick level, considerations of how people move between the space on the ferry? If I'm waiting on the ferry for a ferry that's later, if I'm a pedestrian or if I'm getting out of my vehicle, or a biker, the desired connection to relationship to the viewpoints at Cove Park, interaction with Cove Park, can you just high level, what have you thought about?
Yeah, so some of the ways that we've thought about that is making the intersection safer, because one of the primary ways to get from the terminal around Cove Park is that north-south crossing on the west side of the intersection. Some of the bump outs and benches that we mentioned along the south side of the trestle would be with the intention of how people are connecting to and from the terminal building. In thinking of how that terminal is laid out, where bike lanes are, very much considering the connectivity of the bikes and the pedestrians to the bus stop and how they route north and south on Fauntleroy Way. So yeah, definitely thinking about all the various modes and how they cross over and just keeping it as safe as possible.
Great, thank you. And then one final question, you mentioned the conflicts, the existing conflicts between pickup drop off and bike. How is pickup drop off being thought about in the alternatives that you studied and that you'd like to move forward?
So there will be, you probably know a little more about this as well, Charlie, but there is a designated pickup drop off area, especially for folks with mobility issues. And I think at the moment, WSF utilizes the triangle parking lot a little bit, and that's something that we need to coordinate a bit more with in county and SDOT. So that's something that we're setting up conversations with and continuing collaborating on.
That triangle lot is a informal pickup drop off area. It's not posted, but that's, people do that as well as by Captain's Park on that street. The parents wait up there and then the kids come and they run up the hill. So it's unofficial, but we recognize that people are coming and going, but some people with mobility issues today, they drive all the way down to through the exit lanes. And that's something we want to, the planners haven't figured it out how to make that any better. So we have it on a list. We still haven't finished that piece of work.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Pass the table.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, have you guys explored any opportunities of public art plans or placemaking strategies?
Public art plans and
Strategies.
I'll say that when we went through the Mukilteo project, it was it kind of changed the agency, and the rest of WashDOT is kind of paying attention to what happened. Like, how did you do that, and why did you do that? And it wasn't an accident, but nobody really had a plan. And we recognized that the land had lots of value, spiritual value to the tribes. And one thing led to another, and we ended up really consulting with them heavily and bringing them into the project design. We weighed in on not just the architecture, but putting in, they don't call it art, they like calling cultural motifs. They kind of have like special meaning to them. And after that, I think we can't walk away from that model. They asked us, what are you going to do in Coleman, which was already finishing up at the time, but they let us know that in our future projects like Fauntleroy, they would like to be participating. So while we want to, I do welcome what you have to say or your recommendations, but we also, our agency really wants to talk to them too and see, how are we doing? Do you have any thoughts? Can we use some of your cultural motifs in here? That'll happen. We plan on having our architect work with us and the tribes to bring that in. There'll also be that ArtsWA 0.5% for the arts. I don't know if they're going to be that. There will be separate items. I hope they're separate items because that's a limited budget for us. But yeah, we do plan on reaching out to have some art or cultural motifs as part of this facility.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Are you're designing the dock for the current, ferry load and the current travelers on the ferry? Is that correct? It's current, what we are today, that's what the ferry dock, the new ferry dock will accommodate, is essentially where we're at today. In terms
Well-
of passengers in cars, 2040,
2040,
2040.
2040.
Okay. So I guess I'm just I'm wondering in the future with the projections of Seattle area region growth, is that, so it's the 20 projection is what you're targeting?
Yes.
That's my only question. Thank you. I must have missed that. in your presentation.
So I just want to throw in, so some people say, why don't you make it bigger? Because there's 2050. And the answer is there's other ways to skin the cat. That's not the only way to accommodate more cars if the population were to grow. People can change their mode, right? You say, yeah, that'll never happen. We can put a second slip, we can put overhead loading, we can change good to go and get it more efficient. There's other ways than just making it bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's like the highway system. You just build more lanes, you just have more cars.
We're not, we can't do it. We
Yeah.
can't do it.
Especially over water.
Over
Yeah,
one.
but we don't have to. We don't have to do that.
I'm just gonna be quiet and move along. Thank you.
Yeah, so just in the interest of time, because I'm aware of the clock here, I'm just gonna have one question. So the other park that's close by is Lincoln Park, which is a massive regional park. And, you know, I mean, the views of the ferry terminal from that south end it's right there. And that's a very heavily used part of the park. I mean, there's picnic shelters, there's walking paths. So I'm just curious of the public outreach, if you've heard from West Seattle residents or users of the park expressing any concern one way or the other about the facility getting larger. That's the question.
Not so much. We did look at alternatives early on that were like had remote holding options and that were closer to the park. And those ones were, pretty clearly screened out both from a technical standpoint, but also what we heard from.
Based on what the community.
Yeah, community. But yeah, we haven't heard anything in particular about users of Lincoln Park.
Okay.
But I think that's, just an interesting idea too, thinking about outreach strategies and.
Yeah, I just think that's, you probably get during the NEPA phase of
Yeah.
that before you're gonna hear from, I think you can hear from people there. But, that's
Some
cool.
comment did come and say, can we use that south parking lot and that road that goes straight down to the water? Can we use that as your new terminal? This way you can have a new terminal operating and then you can tear out the old one. That got screened out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I similarly was thinking about Lincoln Park, and it's probably because I don't live there, so Cove Park just feels like an extension, quite honestly, shoreline and, perhaps the
Yeah.
community attached to Lincoln Park. I think my one mentioned that people can pass under the dock currently. So what is the height now and what is it proposed?
So from the street, as you head out onto the dock, there's a toll booth. The toll booths are at the street level, and then it drops 4 feet.
Oh,
The trestle slopes down 4 feet, and then it gets flat. But the other, say 2/3 of the trestle is flat. And
okay,
then
so that 4 feet happens
early on.
early on, as was my other question of when that slope
So
happened.
at high tide, so in the winter, we get the high tide. It's really hard to go underneath
Right.
there without getting wet.
Yeah.
But in the summer, there's these low tides, and so I have to duck. If I just want to go underneath there and not go up on the street and walk around, I have to duck, but I can make it underneath the trestle.
Mhm.
Uh,
So that
that
initial
part
height would
won't
stay
go-
the same.
That's not going to go
Yeah.
up 4 feet. But one cool thing is that the pilings are 15 feet apart from each other. With steel, they can be as many as 40 feet apart. So yes, they're larger, but they're going to be spaced a lot. And a lot of those logs that are accumulating there, blocking the exit of the creek, I think they're going to dissipate.
And then I know we'll see this next time, so I was thinking about pedestrian access and this bump out. So you're talking about currently, I'm assuming that will be part of like a larger study and kind of that placemaking experience that we're talking about on the dock itself, trestle.
But right now it's talked about being on the south side only.
Correct.
Yeah, that's where the pedestrian path runs along.
Right,
and
so it's just
connects.
associated that way, so it's like very clear.
Yeah.
And the last one is just about restoration. That's an interesting comment from SDCI, thinking about, you know, just the overwater implications, the in-water implications. Obviously, I know you know all that. I was just curious about the restoration. So there's mitigation and restoration, or perhaps they're also combined. For the eelgrass, is it anticipated, you know, that is like a repopulation? I know, is there the science behind that really does come back easily? Or not easily, but will come back.
Yeah, certainly not easily, but it can be done. So that is something that we went out and did underwater surveys twice at this point. We've done them a year apart, so that we've got an idea of what it looks like from year to year. And we have a sub-consultant, Confluence, who are very experienced in that department and very aware and thinking of all the various restoration and mitigation potential. So yeah, there's definitely an opportunity to try and restore some of the eelgrass beds there, but there will be other mitigation measures needed as mentioned. Yeah.
I just wondered if we could do a quick rundown of some of the dimensions. Just the total length as well as additional length, you know, and the delta. And then also just width. I mean, you mentioned a few things, but I just want to make sure that in both lanes, but also actual in feet, would be great to just quickly say.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Kayla, today it's about 800 feet long, the trestle,
Okay,
850.
850?
Well, the walk from the intersection all the way to the transfer.
so it's about a little more than the truss. The truss isn't quite that long, but
Correct,
it's
yeah.
850 will become 1,000.
Add 240, add about 240 to that.
Okay, and then the width is, you mentioned number of lanes and the bike lanes and the half lane, just, but what is it, what's that up to?
13, 15 feet wider.
Yeah, it could be up to 13 feet wider on the north, and then south could be up to 5 feet wider.
And so what's the total width then?
Actually, I can't remember the total width off the top of my head.
Uh-oh.
And I don't think
Let's
we
try
have it on.
60. How many lanes is it now?
I could do the
4,
math.
5, 6, 7 times 12, 70, 80.
It's 6 in a walkway right now.
Let's say 80, 90 feet wide.
Okay, and you mentioned the 2 bike lanes. That was really the most important stuff. The only other thing is, like, you mentioned your terminal guidelines, kind of a document that you used as a reference point for the number of cars, which was a 1.5 calculator, which actually came in under that. I assume there's a variety of reasons why you didn't get to the 186 number. And I think you kind of explained it by various pressures on the width and other stuff. But maybe you could, I was curious, are there terminal guidelines about like how far docks or trestles go into the sound? And maybe just a reference point of like what is this going to be relative to other docks we know and love in the sound? Like, is this shorter, longer? Is this the longest one in the system? Like, I just have we'll just use Mokoteo as a reference point.
Yeah, some of them have almost nothing over the water, Orcas, and it's just the way the lay of the land. Here you have a community, so I remember early on people being so afraid that we were going to buy up houses and turn it into parking lots. Nothing could be further from the truth. We don't want to. We want the houses there. We have to figure out a way around this. But this one's going to be about as long as Vashon's.
Okay.
It won't be as wide, but it'll be comparable to Vashon's.
Okay.
But I don't think it's right to compare it to all the other terminals because some of them, they're really small. There's just no land there.
Smaller than Mukilteo.
No, I understand. I mean, it's really just give us a
Scale.
I think many of us are very familiar with these.
It's like a
system.
narrow Vashon.
Okay. Thanks.
I think is that it? Are we done with questions? Great, so now we'll open it up for discussion, which we have about 12 minutes. Which is, it's okay. So maybe I'll just open it up and looking for comments or discussion about overall, let me read through these because we probably have to prioritize. Overall project and goals, integration with the surrounding context and user experience of open space, recreation, views, connections, civic expression, equity, and natural environment and sustainability. I'll open it up to whoever. Molly, you're looking at it, so start us off.
Okay, so project overall and its goals. One thing that I heard you all say that wasn't necessarily big in the presentation was this tribal perspective about the eelgrass, this like ribbon of gold idea is really compelling, right? It's a real driver for why you've made the decisions that you've made. And so I would want to see when you're coming back forward with this, I want to see that as a driving priority. And then I want to understand how it shapes your approach for the building itself, for art integration, for continued engagement with Indigenous individuals, Indigenous artists. So I want to know if really the driving factor for pushing this out is this environmental component. How does it impact how we teach about the ecology around it, the art, how this is integrated into the community? So that's one for an overall. Another overall, I would want to see you all put forward clear goals for bike and ped and bus integration, so that user experience, if really that 2040 set of goals includes not vastly increasing the number of vehicles that are coming into this space, how can you put forward goals for user experience that help people want to be walk-ons on the ferry, that help them want to integrate into the bus system and into the bike system? You talked about those and some of the strategies, so I really want to see that being a driving priority for how the space is designed.
I agree with all. That was great.
I just wanted to add, just to the eelgrass, I wrote down to the ribbon of gold is very compelling, just philosophically, conceptually, and strong motif. So that was why I also asked about the real possibility or, of restoration. And so I think seeing that part of that story as that science and that real ability to restore it, to make sure that thread and all of those implications are actually able to come through.
So then just my main comment, I agree with what's been stated already. I think I'm familiar with the Pell process, and I think part of what's challenging for us is there's been a lot of work done already, right? You can't go from here to there. And we haven't seen that, and that's not a criticism, it's just reality. So I think that I had the same question as Brian about the operations on Fauntleroy, if you may. So it seems to me that just a major trade-off here is the larger facility will potentially improve backup on Fauntleroy, right? Because now you can hold more vehicles on the trestle. The trade-off is you've got a bigger structure. And I was intrigued by Ben's comments about what the mitigation might have to be to get your shoreline permits. I think when you come back, I'd like to understand more about that. What did you have to do to mitigate the larger structure in the water? Because I mean, that is a key trade-off here that we're making. And I think we'll want to hear more about that. Did you want to?
Yeah, and piggyback on that and one of your comments, the phasing of construction, if we are taking away half of this during construction, we're going to put a lot more cars on the road.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Where do they go? This is what I'm trying to get into in terms of the queuing along the roads. If we're taking away capacity for construction, I see that being dumped into the neighborhood, and I think that's a real challenge. So
During construction, or
yeah, if you take away, if you slice it down the middle and take
Right.
away half of the parking, probably taking
little
away
while.
almost all of the parking because you're leaving drive aisles active. You're putting all of that parking in the neighborhood.
how long would the I know you don't know how long, but if you just shut it down, how long would the construction take? in
I know.
best case?
I
Okay,
know.
You do know, okay.
People don't like the answer.
Okay.
So I think if you shut it all down, which is not going to happen,
Yeah.
it's a 2-year project.
Oh, wow, okay. That's a long time to.
Well, and if you don't shut it all down, it's probably twice.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Okay.
that's the real challenge here is,
I think it'd be great to
So-
hear that from you guys, like what are the different options? What are the alternatives that are gonna be introduced to the community? Because you're talking about 300 students every day having to commute. I don't think they're not gonna go to school for 2 years, even if like we
Yeah.
shut it down, and like how much that capacity is gonna affect people's commute. Like if this capacity is being cut in half, are we adding any alternative maybe to another ferry terminal or water taxis? Like just having some idea of, I know it's pretty early on, but I think it's gonna be very important, like which option you're moving forward with and what are the implications of that. It's gonna be really important in our decision-making process as well.
And the only other comment, Ben, I just add on to what Molly said about safety for all users, is the intersection design becomes really a key part of that. So I think, well, and I know this, I think is the city's the lead on that, correct?
We are designing it, we're paying for it,
Okay,
we're using all of their criteria and their
Okay.
reviewers.
so we'll probably want to see more on that.
Okay, do we have, so I have a comment, I think civic expression is a little bit more of the design of the ferry, of the dock and, the appearance of it, and also the design of the building on the dock. So I know we're not there yet, but really interested in understanding what the concept is. There's a space planning aspect of it, but maybe that could be tied in with the ribbon of gold or something that's important for that place and time. So I think that would be a really great, and start working with the architecture or the design team to see some a conceptual approach to it. Understand. Or that would be, I'm not sure I'm talking to you. I actually haven't talking, I should be talking.
Yeah, I started
to
that with the time, so just.
So we're short on time, but I.
We agree.
Yeah, no, we agree. So, yeah,
agree.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Consider
Yeah.
that.
No, I think, you've mentioned too, before it was mentioned, that, that I think that's the really important piece. So too, like obviously the trestle is about the functionality and making something that works for the ferry system. But the building itself makes it functional and better for the people who work there, but then also for the user experience and for actually something that can be really iconic for that area that, should not fall by the wayside, right? That should not be the thing that kind of is like, well, the less important piece. So like, I think that whole south side pedestrian experience, how that ties into that, to the terminal, the views start to really look out. I think when we talk about Lincoln Park too, Lincoln Park looking to the terminal, vice versa, what that whole view shed is, it could be really, magnificent. So really, thinking about that on those bigger kind of regional scales of that whole west side of West Seattle is critical when we come back.
Yeah, and especially with the idea of, the future cars, when you said there's different ways of skinning a cat and I think, pedestrians, bikes, all those buses, making that more of a priority, but a big priority so that the cars are not dominating the ferry experience, which is kind of my experience of ferries is all about big parking lots full of cars and driving, waiting in lines and all that stuff. So making, really emphasizing that, I think would be a really powerful opportunity for this terminal. Connection to the parks, you have a couple of maybe little parks there, so. Does that make sense? Does anyone agree with that? So just, I'm gonna recap here real quick. So project overall and its goals, I think, the ribbon of gold and the eelgrass restoration is really important to our group. And the restoration of that art integration with indigenous peoples and how you can express that or coordinate with them to whether they want it or maybe they don't. I think you mentioned integration of the surrounding context and user experience, and like what did you do to make Fauntleroy a better experience during construction, or what can you do to make Fauntleroy a better experience during construction? And how the construction capacity might be reduced and what other options you guys are considering during whatever construction period that you're looking at there. And you already mentioned the intersection of the intersection design is a key component of the overall plan. And I think I would always like to see like a step out from, I know we're looking very specifically at your dock, but if you could zoom out to like a little bit further out aerial or
Yeah, a little bit
plan.
north and south.
Yeah, to kind of, so we can see a little bit more of the context when we come back to the concept, that would be helpful for everyone. We didn't really get to open space, but I think you guys are aware that the parks, the Cove Park, the adjacent parks are really important to the ferry terminal success, and I'm sure certain the neighborhood as well. So being sensitive to that. I don't think we had any comments on recreation. I'm not sure what recreation there would be there. So anyway, yeah. Views, you comment on the views, and I think that's really neat to have some places to just take in the view, get out your car, or if you're walking down there, get out your car and take views. Appreciate that. Multimodal connections are really super important, and the more you can bring that to the forefront, maybe making cars not quite as important would be great. Civic expression, conceptual expression of the architecture and the trestle and the user experience, iconic for the area, pedestrian experience again. Equity, I think continuing to include the community and the different groups in your decision-making process as you guys are doing, just continuing that. And then natural environment and sustainability, ribbon of gold is a driving concept. If that is the driving concept, I think we were all struck by that, and it felt like a really important part of that place. So, did I miss anything?
I would just
probably did.
add a little bit to the sustainability piece.
Okay.
So I think just knowing that this is a moment for civic expression, really just sharing with us when you're coming back, how you're meeting kind of best practices in sustainability, ecological teaching, and embodied carbon. So we toss in there.
Something I would emphasize a little more is early integration of public art and thoughtful peacemaking in collaboration with the local tribes, and looking at the Mukilteo terminal as precedent, because this project is multi-layered. It's more than just a terminal. It's a threshold between the city and the Salish Sea and connectors of islands and communities. And I think early art plan could help communicate these stories and tell the stories of different identities through design.
Okay, so. Okay. My typing. So anyway, we really appreciate the goals, all of the things that we just spoke about. And those are our recommendations. So we're going to take action, and do I have to?
Yeah, there is a
Oh.
line here.
Oh,
We
okay.
also want to ask, is there anything that you feel that we've missed, that you would want to clarify before we take an action?
I think you were saying something about telling a story, and that comes with our art. It was our intention to tell a story. I'm not sure what that story is. There's plenty of stories, but this is an opportunity to educate the general public while they're waiting around. Like, what happened here? Why is it called Fauntleroy? What are those things down in the water? You can tell some type of a story. Birders love places like this. So when I heard recreation, like, I think birding's a recreation, maybe just for us older folks, but that would be great if all of that could be worked into the terminal. That Audubon was saying, meet down at the dock at this time Sunday morning, and it's just a great place to go. And again, the aquarium, meet underneath the dock, or I don't know if that's allowed, but I think it's a gem. It's a gem, and we should keep it that way.
Yeah, so we'd just like to, we got so long here, so we'd like to thank the project team for the presentation of the concept design of Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement pre-concept phase, right? Is that what we're at right now? Not the concept phase, the pre-concept phase. And I think the Sales Design Commission approves the pre-concept phase of the project and the alternative for Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement. Take a vote. Right?
Certainly, yes.
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 Vote yes, and look forward to seeing the next version.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll follow up with you because I think that you all need to be making some decisions through your environmental documents. And when it feels like maybe that's the next touch point, when you actually publish your environmental determinations and take into account some of the things that the commission has talked about today. So we'll just talk soon.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our presenters for,
She's a skin.
yeah. He's being very polite. I want to welcome the presenters for our next item, Lakecity floodplain.
Okay.
We're just pivoting from our last review, so give us a minute. We'll be ready to start. Thanks, Trish. And
John, I'm with Seattle Parks, but,
okay,
yeah, and, Tracy.
Yeah.
Tracy's gonna be doing the majority of the presenting, but. I'm close enough by.
And Tracy, I was just talking to John Pagan, and he's here in person, understanding that the presenters are all online today.
Well, that's the one was presenting. That's why I was giving it.
He's wearing multiple.
Yeah.
Are you?
And Tracy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. We'll be starting here in just a second.
Okay, sounds great.
No, I had to, go to the line order, but I was in a rush.
It's good.
Oh, so they did.
They did, yeah. I think it's because it was already irritated, so they, yeah, they put the permanent one on, so.
That's why.
I'm not gonna say too much.
Great. That's how we keep our figures.
Okay, look third.
Hey, Valerie.
How you doing? I'm so glad to see you.
Good. Yeah, nice to see you too. See you.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Michael.
See you. Yeah.
Happy spring. How's everybody doing?
Good, good. You should see the OPCD is like huge now. You should come
Oh, really?
by. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the whole floor is full of people. It's crazy.
Nice. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, come by.
Dave Leclerc.
Who's there? I can't see everybody with the small faces.
Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Kevin. How's it
How you
going?
doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Are you still with the city?
Yeah, I've been at SPU since
Okay.
2018. Yeah.
Cool. Let's see.
Kevin, how long have you been serving on the design commission?
2 years. So just
Cool.
starting the second term now.
He is going to be appointed chair, hopefully.
We'll see.
We'll see.
You know, I don't want.
We'll see. You never know.
Hey.
Slow down.
Nice.
I cross my fingers. Why don't we go ahead and start with introductions? And just for the record, we'll be having our second review today of the Lakecity Floodplain project. We'll start with introductions at the table, and I said earlier I was talking with Tracy just a couple of minutes ago. Most of the presenters are online today. John Pagan from Seattle Parks is here in person as part of the presenting team. And so we'll do a round of introductions. Tracy, are you expecting any members of the public to attend today?
No.
We don't have anybody here in the room from the public, but the reason why I'm asking is we provide up to 2 minutes per person for public comment. So we want to make sure that make sure that the opportunity is made available within the meeting, and we have you until 12:30. Why don't we start with introductions on our left today, just to break things up a bit, and we'll start with Zubin and then go around the table.
All right, morning, Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
Morning, Ray Gastel, Planning Commissioner.
Phoebe Bogart, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Good morning, Kevin O'Neill, Transportation Planning Commissioner and Acting Chair.
Caitlin Trong, Get Engaged Commissioner.
Good morning, Molly Spitalnik, Urban Design Commissioner.
Hi, Shirin Masudi, At-Large Commissioner.
Hello, Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
And why don't we, Tracy, Dave, and Maya, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tracy Bonashinsky. I am co-executive director at Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group. We're a local nonprofit, and I have a little bit more about us in our formal presentation, so I'll keep it to that.
Thanks, Tracy. Dave?
Hi, folks. Dave Leclerc, SPU Drainage and Wastewater. I work on green infrastructure projects and manage the Green Infrastructure and Urban Villages program that has been funding SPU's piece of the project you're going to be presenting on today. Recently handed off the project management role to Maya, so I'm more here for any historic questions that might come up. Thanks.
And Maya.
My name is Maya Garber-Yance. I work with SPU's Drainage and Wastewater.
That us or them.
I think that might be Maya froze up a bit. John, could you introduce yourself? Oh, did we get you back?
Still freeze?
No, you're back. That's fine. John?
Yeah, I'm John Pagan. I am a project manager with Seattle Parks, and just a little context. This partnership on the project, as you can tell, is between Seattle Parks, SPU, and Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group. A unique scenario where the city, Parks and SPU bought the property, and Mid-Sound really championed kind of getting the project off the ground and raising grant funds to get the design consultants on board and all that. So it's a three-way partnership as who's managing the project, essentially.
Thanks, John. Who's going to be, Tracy, are you doing the presentation for us today?
Yes, I am going to do the bulk of the presentation. I have told my city team members that they are welcome to interrupt me at any point if they would like to add something. So if that happens, that is why. But I will be planning on doing the bulk of the talking until we get to the end. And then I think all of us will probably answer questions.
And our meeting ends today at 12:30.
Great.
Great, thanks. Go ahead and take it away.
Can I share my screen? I can start sharing my screen?
Yeah, go,
Yeah,
please.
okay. All right. Okay. All right. How does that look to everyone?
But you have a button that says full there. That's getting better. Although now you have two screens.
Oh, you can see both. Okay, how's that?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, super.
You can maximize that one.
And then, yeah, max on.
Maximize this one. How's that?
Better.
Okay, super. All right, so thank you so much for having us here today. We're really excited to share with you about the Lakecity Floodplain Park project. As John said, this is a really unique collaboration between two City of Seattle departments, Seattle Public Utilities and Seattle Parks and Recreation, and a nonprofit, Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group. we did want to take just a couple minutes at the beginning of this presentation to talk about our relationship. You've met us already, but the City of Seattle team, would you like to start by saying something about how this experience has been for you and what it's like to work together?
Yeah, I'll hop in, John. I know maybe you had we all have some nice things to say about working with Midsound. It's been I'm new on this project, but being able to look at the history of this project over time and now working on it myself, it's pretty clear that working with Midsound has allowed us to have, Midsound has been able to do a really amazing job with community engagement in a way that as a city department, we're not always able to do, which I think really speaks volumes in this project. And you'll see throughout this presentation kind of the impact of that community engagement. It's also great to have an outside kind of entity moving things along. And Tracy has done just a phenomenal job working with all of the city bureaucracy from both departments, checking off boxes and keeping us moving forward. So I know I speak for myself and Dave and John that this has just been a phenomenal partnership in a lot of ways. So John, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would just add, the partnership has really made the project a reality, and it's been a really successful grant fundraising project with King County in particular. And to add to what Maya was saying, it set some precedents internally on how our two city departments have worked together, where we've created joint reviews where SPU officially joins Parks' ProView process, and we officially do all the comments together. And the same with both city agencies have a stage gate process for approval to move forward, and we've kind of combined all our efforts there. And I know the city's saying a lot, like one city is kind of our motto in a lot of ways, and it's just been interesting and really successful having an outside agency like Midsound with more of a habitat fish expertise, helping lead the design process and kind of getting us all on board. So thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya and John. It's really been a pleasure to work with you. So here's where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Midsound. We are a local 501c3 nonprofit, and we're one of 14 regional fisheries enhancement groups across the state of Washington with a common mission to recover wild salmon and steelhead populations. We restore salmon habitat in close partnership with others, working with private and public landowners, community volunteers, construction contractors, engineers, tribes, other nonprofits, and federal, state, and local funding agencies to design and construct a variety of salmon habitat restoration projects. We also design and implement education programs for watershed residents of all ages to help them understand that we all live in salmon habitat and how important it is to take care of this place that we live in. It's very special in part because we have salmon. So the Lakecity Floodplain Park project really combines all of the things that we are about as a nonprofit in a very immediate way. We're restoring fish habitat. I often call this a project of hope, as there are a lot of fish passage barriers that are downstream of the project site, but someday they will be removed. And when they are, the fish who are able to access this habitat will be welcomed to a restored place that is good for them. We're connecting a diverse community to that healthy habitat, providing opportunities for culturally relevant and meaningful education, and we're working with a really fantastic partner. So it's been an honor to work closely with staff at SPU and SPR on all aspects of the project over the past 5 years. I think for the past 3 or 4. They're incredibly thoughtful, smart people with a lot of heart. Seattle's lucky to have them as public servants, and we're so lucky to be in partnership with them and the Lake City community. So you just met us. So I want to talk about our project timeline here. We spent much of 2022 engaging with the Lake City community, which I'll talk more about over the several upcoming slides. During this period, we used iterative community feedback to develop 3 conceptual options for park access and amenities. We also analyzed the current condition and restoration needs of the creek, floodplain, and a wetland on site, and developed 3 conceptual options for creek alignment. We completed options analysis for both park amenities and creek alignment, selected a preferred option for each, and have advanced those integrated options to 60% design. We've completed cultural resources, started permitting, and have secured almost all construction funding. We're currently at 60% design and have appeared before ProView Tech, where SPU staff joined SPR staff, as John said, in that official review in order to streamline approvals. We're in the process of developing a new contract with our consultant team that will take us to final design. That contract should be fully executed in the next week, I hope. It's been a lot of work to get there, but we're almost there. We're on schedule to go to bid in early 2026 and construct the project that summer. All work below the ordinary high water mark must take place during the fish window, which is between July 1st and August 31st. Upland work may take place in that time period or extend into the fall. Our partnership model is a bit unique, and it took us some time to figure it out. As John said, I think this project is setting some really good precedent, and because it's relatively new, it is just, that actually has been a really important aspect of this project, is figuring out how the two city departments are going to work together and what it means for the city to work with a nonprofit like us. The community and the creek are at the core of what we do. The community, we consider them experts on neighborhood needs and priorities. They have reviewed and commented on all conceptual designs, and they may be invited to implement the project even through some volunteer plantings. Parks acquired the site and will be responsible for upland restoration and long-term maintenance. They have dedicated staff to the project team. It's been a pleasure to work with John and his predecessors. They're actively involved, and they've made their review process and specifications available to Mid-Sound and SPU staff to streamline approvals. SPU, we consider the subject matter experts for creek restoration, including floodplain and wetland design. They're responsible for long-term maintenance of the floodplain and on-site culvert. They have dedicated staff to the project team and are actively involved and participate in the parks review process to streamline approvals. Staff from both departments have done so much to help us navigate the internal processes that exist in both departments and secure and maintain leadership buy-in. We really could not do this project without them, and I'm so grateful for their strong partnership. Mid-Sound has led the design process and community engagement. We secured and hold the funding for all design phases of the project. And finally, King County has been a major project funder, including for acquisition and design through various of their funding opportunities. One of our overarching project goals is to create a space that connects a diverse Lake City community to an improved natural area. Our other overarching project goals are to restore Thornton Creek on the property to a more natural state, to reduce large-scale flooding, to create and restore habitat for salmon and wildlife, and to improve the health of Thornton Creek and its watershed. Early in the project, the decision was made to prioritize the creek as a major stakeholder. All decisions about the creek were grounded in scientific analysis within some infrastructure and property line constraints. Some of the major goals for creek restoration are to reduce peak flows and channel incision, enhance and ensure sediment diversity and transport, create in-stream hydraulic complexity, and ensure adequate base flows. All park amenities considered had to work around the needs that the creek has to meet creek and floodplain goals for the project. Community access has always been a critical part of this project. Lakecity is an underserved neighborhood that lacks access to green spaces, and acquisition of this formerly private property created an exciting opportunity to both restore the creek and connect a diverse community to a healthy natural area. Some of the major goals for park amenities are to create a sustainable passive park where residents can immerse themselves in nature without leaving the city, celebrate the diverse Lake City community in the design, limit impervious surfaces, as this park is entirely within environmentally critical areas, and promote safety through environmental design and enhancing visibility from roads and nearby properties. Okay, here we are. The project site is located on Northeast 125th Street between 23rd and 24th Avenues Northeast. It's west of Lake City's Civic Core, about 4 blocks from Seattle Public Library's Lake City branch. Very walkable. The neighborhood is also incredibly diverse, with high percentages of BIPOC and immigrant communities and health disparities. One of the reasons this project is so exciting is that it's at the nexus of improving habitat and creating a community asset in an area that has a real need. This project will make a meaningful difference to the Lake City community when it is fully constructed and accessible to them. So the immediate surrounding context of the site is a really important element that poses both design opportunities and challenges. So I wanted to highlight it here. It's bordered by private property on the north, west, and most of the east side. There's no through street bordering the north end of the site. You can see that it doesn't even the street up on the north doesn't even approach the north border of our site. Current access to the property is from Northeast 125th Street, which is a busy arterial. 24th Avenue Northeast is a short cul-de-sac street. And the southeast corner of the site, that kind of the shape that forms the L, has some of the steepest slopes on the site. So when you're standing up on 125th, you really have the feeling of looking down into the site. The slopes are that steep. Seattle Design Commission previously asked us to explore partnerships on abutting properties for trail easements, including properties from the north, and supported a second access point to the site with the understanding that the topography provides challenges to accomplish that goal. We think that both of these points are very well made, and we did explore possibilities for easements and a second access point. Unfortunately, abutting property owners are not interested in allowing public access on their properties at this time. The city is paying attention, however, to possible future acquisition opportunities if certain properties come up for sale that might allow for those additional trails and access points. Additionally, we really tried hard to make access at the southeast corner of the site work, but there were conflicts with the environmental critical areas and infrastructure that just kind of precluded it. It wasn't a good solution for the site. That said, we really do agree with the commission that a second access point would have been ideal. This is a slide that we shared with the community to help them understand the really unique topography and ecosystems on the project site. As you can see, the entire site is entirely within critical areas and their buffers, including steep slopes at the south end of the site, Thornton Creek running diagonally through the site, and 2 wetland areas, one quite large on the east side of the site. In addition to these critical areas, there are many mature native conifers and other trees that we're working around. We're committed to removing a tree only in 2 cases. If it is invasive, there's one black locust on site that will be removed for this reason, or if it is completely unavoidable because of creek realignment and floodplain regrading. We've already made several design adjustments that allowed us to save even more trees than we had initially thought possible. So that is that was a high priority for us. The important takeaway here is that our project site did not come to us as a flat, totally blank canvas on which we can build anything we would like. It came to us with its really own unique topography and important natural features that we have honored to the best of our ability while still allowing public access. Okay, so we considered 3 creek alignment options, and based on modeling and infrastructure constraints like the King County sewer main that runs underground, this is where we landed. We're really excited to add creek length through that meander and a back channel to maximize large woody material in the channel, which creates habitat complexity, including refugia for juvenile fish. We're excited that we are maintaining as many native trees as possible. It's nice that the site was so large and that the property owners had kept a lot of trees on it. That benefits our project. We're excited to increase flood storage on site while minimizing it on neighboring properties to the east. We're very mindful about that. And we are excited to maximize hyporheic exchange on this process. The hyporheic zone is the region of sediment and porous space beneath and alongside a stream bed where there's a mixing of shallow groundwater and surface water. This has been a really important part of several SPU projects, including Kingfisher and the Thornton Creek Confluence, and we're super excited to include it in this project as well. So from the very beginning of this project, the creek and the community have been really important stakeholders, as I keep saying. I keep saying it because it's so true and important for us. And we feel really accountable to both the creek and the community. We want both and need both to be healthy and thriving. So as such, we're really committed to communicating clearly with integrity and transparency for connected relationships. This is especially important to the Lake City community, who told us in our early engagement interviews that they have often felt left behind. that they've seen investments in other neighborhoods that they don't feel they are receiving as well. And it has become clear that repair and reconnection are really necessary to rebuild trust with that community. In order to remove barriers to participation for the community, we went out into the community during each phase of engagement to reach people where they were. We did not wait for them to come to us or choose days or times for virtual workshops that would be difficult for them to manage. Finally, we still do periodic equity check-ins and hold equity-focused meetings in our internal team to ensure that we're centering community needs as the project moves along. In the first virtual community workshop, this was way back in 2022 now, and related in-person engagement, we started at the very beginning. We didn't make any assumptions about what the community might want or need. So we started at the very beginning with our questions and asked people to share their hopes, dreams, and needs for the neighborhood and for the project site. We coded the frequency with which residents mention certain words, which you can see in this word cloud. Most of them have to do with nature, community, and safety. Very fortunately, the things that the community told us were important were also things that were called out as important to our city partners, SPR and SPU. So early on, there was a pretty high alignment between the community and our city departments about what was important for the site. We took the most frequently mentioned words and paired them with National Park Service icons to be used in the second virtual community workshop and related in-person engagement. So you can see these here. We consider these our park ideas. And then community members were given a set of tiles, either physical tiles or when we were online, virtual ones, asked to discuss the park ideas represented on them and how they might fit with the environmentally critical areas on the site. So in our first engagement, we were kind of asking broadly, like what is important to your community and what is important to a natural area. Now in the second engagement, we're asking them to think more specifically about the site on which the project will be built. And then they got to design a park by placing the tiles on a map. When we went out into the community, we took a translator to help us bridge gaps with community members whose first language was not English. We had a fantastic time taking this exercise to the Lakecity Farmers Market, where these pictures come from, to a neighborhood school, and two groups of elders, one native English speakers and the other native Spanish speakers. We ended up with 44 really lovely parks designed by over 100 community members. Some designed their own and others worked in groups. It was so fun, really, really fun to listen to people as they talked through their ideas and moved tiles around as they were in conversation with either each other or with me. It's one of my favorite. This was probably my favorite part of our community engagement. So our landscape architect took all of the community generated park designs and consolidated them into one design here. You see this diagrammatic plan. So she was looking for both consensus and divergence of ideas to help us understand what was broadly important and where there was some flexibilities in amenity choices for the design team. So the community agreed that there should be restoration only in the creek buffer. They weren't really excited about seeing access in the creek buffer. That it was important to limit user impacts. Everybody was very sensitive to the fact that the creek was special and needed protections. That restoration, relaxation, and quiet were particularly important for the north end of the park. Community members who were able to be on site with us noticed how much quieter it was as they traveled from Northeast 125th to the back of the site. And they valued the sense of respite that they felt while still in the middle of a very busy urban neighborhood. And the community told us also that we should prioritize previously disturbed areas for park amenities development instead of creating new disturbances. The places that we found flexibility were in public art installation. The community liked the idea of art, but did not express that the art had to be in a specific location or be of a specific type. We had flexibility in the bridge, both its location and design, and the opportunity for future trail connections as allowed through easements or property acquisitions. Our landscape architect then considered what themes and forms could inspire conceptual designs built from the diagrammatic plan. She felt that nature themes, including native plants and fish, were appropriate given the natural beauty of the site, the desire for the community to have an accessible green space, and the importance of creek restoration to the project. As a reminder, all design concepts and placement of amenities had to work with a selected creek alignment option and all the environmentally sensitive areas on the site. So her inspiration and creative thinking in the context of all the constraints we gave her resulted in 3 conceptual design options that were shared with the SPR, SPU, and Seattle Design Commission. They represented 3 different levels of impact to the park. Option 1 had the fewest public access amenities and therefore the lightest footprint. Option 3 had the most public access amenities and therefore the highest impact on the site. And then option 2 was somewhere in between option 1 and 3. City partners were happy with the design direction. However, commissioners commented that the 3 design options shown may be only one option, and that it would be nice to see the team explore other design language and or concepts that might help them solve some of the problems that currently exist with access and safety. So we did that. We went back to our landscape architect, gave her that feedback, and she explored other design languages. However, it turned out that they changed only the form of the amenities, but did not allow us to really solve site access issues. Again, because the site is so constrained by environmentally critical areas and underground infrastructure, both things that different design language just was not able to overcome. But there they are. So city desire to advance the original concept combined with our commitment to be responsive to our robust iterative community process led us back to where we started. The team selected 2 of the options to share with the community in a 3rd virtual workshop and related in-person outreach opportunities. The lower impact option was presented as an opportunity to maximize quiet and solitude, and the higher impact option was presented as an opportunity for gathering with small groups of friends and family or for meeting neighbors and community members. Okay, this was in our 3rd community feedback opportunity, we gave puzzle pieces to community members of different parts of the park and amenities that were in those or could be in those different parts of the park, and asked them to kind of puzzle them together in a way that I guess, again, they were sort of getting to build their own park, but this way in a little bit more of a constrained way, based on all the feedback that we had gotten from them previously. And again, our landscape architect was looking for points of consensus and points of divergence. Things that we found were important to the community was a loop trail, seating, accessible trails. The bridge was important to them. They really wanted to be able to travel back and forth throughout the site. They didn't want to have to stay up front to the south by the street. Gathering was really important to them. The trails were important. The creek continued to be very important to them. The things where there was pretty even division in the community was how the loop trail should look, whether there should be kind of a central trail connection across the north side of the site. The community was really divided on that access at the southeast corner of the site, where I told you that we ultimately decided that the critical areas and other constraints made it kind of impossible. The community, I think, was also grappling with that as well. And then the size of the plaza in the back of the park was also something that the community was divided about. Some of them wanted it to be very small, and some of them wanted it to be larger. So we felt we had some room to play around with that. And here is where we are at 60% design. This design has been extremely well vetted by the community. They really were important partners in developing it. Our city project team and their leadership have also been involved, and it has appeared before Purview Tech. So this design features 2 gathering spaces, one at the north end of the site and one at the south, walking paths, and opportunities for nature immersion. It maximized creek and floodplain restoration, minimizes impact to an existing wetland. There's a big wetland over on the east part of the site, and retains as many native trees as possible. So you might notice that the boardwalk connection on the east side of the site has been removed from the design. And this happened after consultation with permitting agencies and the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. Both, especially the Muckleshoot, suggested that the ecological function of the site would be significantly compromised by an east trail connection. That trail connection would go right through a wetland. And they preferred that that not happen. So we've submitted permitting applications that include an at-grade loop at the north end of the park. You can kind of see I've indicated that by that yellow sketchy line that indicates that we are planning to put a loop connection there, but we're not exactly sure about where it will be. Our permitting applications would allow it to go incredibly close to the creek, so we'll see what feedback we get from there, and we may have to pull it up a little bit north. How close it comes to the creek is yet to be determined. So I'll address some past commissioner comments here as well. Commissioners commented that where long stretches of walkway occur, there should be improvements that allow people to pass each other with ease. And we agree, all path widths have been designed to accommodate easy passing. Another commissioner commented that we make sure widths of paths will support all types of users, passing strollers, etc. Also, we agree that this is very important and it has been done. Okay, this is a design vignette that shows the park from 125th, approaching the entrance from the east. So you can see the street there, the sidewalk, there's an entrance plaza where you can see people standing. And then because the site is so steep from the entrance plaza, you very quickly kind of are descending into the park on a path, and the plaza is below. You can't really see it in this picture. This one shows how the park might feel and look if you are entering it. This is still on the south side of the creek, but well into the park off of the Gathering Plaza onto the boardwalk. You can see the back channel, those kind of things that look like rocks. That's part of the back channel of Thornton Creek that we're designing to the right. And then the bridge over Thornton Creek is over there on the left. Okay, and then finally, this vignette shows the park from the perspective of someone standing on the North Plaza, looking back toward 125th, sort of to the southwest. It really is amazing how much quieter it is back there. The sound from 125th really melts away, and there are lots of birds and other critters making nice nature sounds. Okay. I wanted to share this slide as a way of reminding everyone that the dominant features and identity of the park will be natural. These aren't from the park, but examples of what some of the natural features could look like once the large woody materials are placed in the creek channel and native plants are installed in the appropriate place for their growing needs. I'm really glad to see that we're seeing more and more wood reintroduced in our urban systems, because I think it's really important and beautiful, and I think more people will come to feel the same when they have an opportunity to experience it and become curious about why we're putting it back into our rivers and streams. And this is also a way to say, like, I don't have a lot of like very nice built things to show you. There's not going to be a lot of that, but there are going to be a lot of beautiful natural features. So last time we were before this body, commissioners recommended that SDOT should be included and engaged in all right-of-way solutions for access and circulation, including crosswalks and other right-of-way improvements. We agreed and have been in communication with SDOT since early in the design process. We're really fortunate, this is a great synergy, that our project site is within their improvement corridor. They currently have this Northeast 130th to Northeast 125th corridor improvement project going on. That is allowing for right-of-way improvements that really probably would have been out of budget and out of scope for our project. So I feel incredibly grateful that this is somehow coming together at the same time. SDOT's schedule is slightly ahead of ours. They plan to go to construction this summer. We plan to go to construction next summer, but we have been able to communicate our preferred outcomes for the area just around the park. And some of those ideas have been integrated into SDOT's design. For example, there are new crosswalks that are going in both to the east and west of the park. I circled them with the orange circles. Then the commission also wanted more information on pedestrian and vehicular access to the site to better understand how people will arrive to the site. It's a good question. This is a very urban space. The primary access to the park will be by foot. Neighborhood residents may walk or roll to the park. Others may arrive by bus. There's a bus stop that's half a block from the park entrance, which you can see indicated in purple on the SDOT drawing. Commissioners also wanted more information on how on-site access will occur for site operations and maintenance crews, including the role of the right-of-way versus on-site access in achieving this work. Maintenance access is still being worked out right now. It's one of our favorite topics. We talk about it all the time. It may not be safe to provide maintenance access from the right-of-way. It would have to cross what SDOT is otherwise planning to be a buffered bike lane, and pulling in and out on 125th, which is, again, a really busy arterial. People drive too fast on it, despite the speed limit. There's a kind of a hill to the west of the site. I think that kind of, and it's like right now very wide, so that encourages people to drive more quickly than they should. Anyway, all this is causing some safety concerns for both maintenance workers, other vehicles, bikes in the bike lane, and pedestrians. So we're really thinking hard about how we can provide the safest access that also works for the maintenance folks. Maintenance parking may be provided on 24th Avenue Northeast if we really can't work it out on 125th, or through an agreement with a neighboring property owner if we can work out some kind of interlocal agreement. Okay, commissioners also asked to see planting plans. It was really challenging for me to get the whole site on one slide in a really legible way. And this, I don't even think I did that well, but anyway, I broke the site up into 3 sections here. So you can see over on the left, it's the north side of the site. The middle section is the south side of the site, including the creek. And then the picture on the left shows the kind of east, that little L, this part of the site that makes our park an L. All the plantings will be native, and placed with sensitivity to their growing needs. So we get the right plant in the right place. We do have, like I said, lots of wetlands on site. We'll have some beautiful emergence we'll be able to put in. Lots of ground cover, bushes and trees will go in. Native conifers will go in. The plants will be designed to maximize habitat, while also providing sight lines in and out of the park for visitor comfort and safety. So we're kind of balancing two things here. One, we need, for habitat reasons, for the creek riparian area to be well planted, to cool the water, to provide nutrient inputs for fish, and other habitat reasons. And we also need people to feel safe in the site. And I think, and to have sight lines from 125th that allow people to feel safe and be safe. So we're going to balance and manage those 2 things to the best of our ability. Okay, so I want to end with a big thank you to our funders, because without them, none of this could happen. King County provided acquisition funding through Conservation Futures. The King County Flood Control District has provided funding for design through their flood reduction grant opportunity. We've also received waterworks funding from the wastewater treatment division. Seattle Parks and Recreation and Seattle Public Utilities have been so generous in allowing their staff to work on this project, and their time doesn't come from our grant funding. So I know there's some in-kind match coming through that avenue. And then so far, our construction funding has come from the Department of Ecology and the Recreation and Conservation Office. And again, it's really like, I think this shows what a group effort these projects are. It takes a lot of people pulling for something big to happen, and we've got it here, and it's so good. So that's what I have. I know that there were other commissioner questions and comments that I didn't sprinkle throughout this presentation. I am happy to address them if you would like to. I have a list of them in my back pocket, and I'm happy to take any questions or field comments as you have them.
Excellent. Thanks, Tracy. What we'll do is, I think I may have mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. Well, first, thank you for a very informative presentation. We typically reserve up to 2 minutes of public comment for members of the public. I'm not seeing anybody attending virtually. If there is somebody attending and you want to make public comment, if you could raise your hand. We're going to go through commissioner questions now, and we'll loop back in case someone does raise their hand and want to ask a question. So what we'll do Tracy, like last time, there'll be commissioner questions, then they'll pivot to deliberation, picking up on some of the work today, and then close out with an action and recommendation.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen, or would you like me to keep sharing it in the event
No,
that people
you
want to say
wanna-
something?
I think let's put it on the plan and then often commissioners, I'll be taking action. But often commissioners will ask you to kind of toggle if they want to see
Okay.
something else. So maybe
All right.
putting up one of the plans just as a starting point would be great. So we'll
Sure.
go through and ask questions. Kind of, we'll start left way to right, and then we'll start with a list of kind of deliberation topics after our question period.
Yeah, I just, clarification, you explained it, but maybe could restate it a little bit. What exactly is the intent of the indicated potential loop that you are not yet ready to commit to where it would happen in the design? And how does that relate to two engagement points that you raised, which was one, the Muckleshoot tribal concerns regarding the potential having anything in the wetlands of that kind, and also the community's desire to make sure that they had access to the full site. So two is what, like, sort of input question, and the other one is just and just sort of re-explain what it means to make that sort of dotted line there.
Yes, so I want to keep these two questions in mind. So the first is about why we're considering it. Is that the first question?
Well, the first is why is it not resolved yet? Why
is
you're
it not
still-
resolved yet? Okay,
And I think you may have answered some of that, but I'm just asking you to restate it maybe.
yes.
And then the second part is, how is this reflecting, it seems like there's some conflicting input on whether there's should or could be a trail or a boardwalk in this area.
Yes, okay, so why is this not resolved yet? That's a great question. It's not resolved yet because it's complicated and we have different stakeholders have different ideas about it. And so we have had really robust conversation and it's just hard. So there is a real desire for people to have access to the site. There was a real desire for a loop trail connection. That was something that was important to the community and our community engagement. It was something that was important to the design commission and to our landscape architect, actually, when she was thinking about site safety considerations. A lot of people were really uncomfortable with an in and out, which was one of our options, was just to have people enter from 125th, be able to walk back to the North Gathering Plaza and walk back. But I think for maybe human psychological reasons, like humans just love a loop. Even my son, when we would go hiking when he was little, he had a preference for a loop hike over an in and out hike. So I think that there's something maybe just in our psyches that likes a loop. And then there are real safety issues too. Like I think having just an in and out rather than a loop kind of might create some safety issues where people might feel or get trapped in unfortunate situations. And we want the site to be safe for people. It won't be activated and a vibrant part of the community if it's not safe. So those are all considerations in favor of a loop trail. But because the site is entirely within environmentally critical areas and their buffers, we need to be mindful that that space, we have to consider like how it is functioning ecologically and where we're putting impacts that. And having a loop trail in that space will impact the functioning of the floodplain. It will impact the wetland. So we have to think very carefully about that. And there are people who are very much focused on the floodplain and the fish who feel very uncomfortable about having any loop trail, right? Like, because they're holding in mind that priority for us. And then, yes, the Muckleshoot very strongly told us that having a boardwalk through the wetland was just sort of a non-starter for them and doesn't kind of help advance their their goals for healthy ecosystems. And so out of respect for them and with permitting agencies telling us that that would be hard to permit, we just took that boardwalk out and therefore like went back to considering that loop trail. So taking the east access out was actually something that bounced us back toward having a loop trail up there. So that's why it's not resolved. And the way we've managed it so far is to submit a design plan to permitters at 60% that does show a loop trail that does extend like all the way down to the creek and comes back up. The idea being like they will tell us, will you permit that or not? And if they won't, then we'll have to figure out what they will permit. And if they will permit that, then we have to have some more hard conversations with our team to decide like how close is the team comfortable letting that trail come to the creek. And if we're not comfortable letting it close, are we comfortable letting there be like one access point, like a trail, and then maybe one access point down to the creek and then back up and around? So the reason it's not resolved a little bit is because of so many conflicting valid opinions, and kind of waiting to see what permitters will tell us. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, no, you certainly touched on it in the presentation, but thank you for the restating and clarification.
And could you please flip to a slide that best describes the extent of the floodplain so we can better understand the portion that the Muckleshoot would be concerned about?
I think they're concerned about the wetland too,
The
which is different. That's shown on one slide more clearly.
Yeah.
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 Oh, the wetland further.
Yeah, the wetland is
Further.
more
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
And please take this wetland area as like ish. I just put that in there based on looking at another map. So this is not necessarily like where the wetland is delineated, but it is an okay approximation. So
But the Muckleshoot,
go ahead.
the Muckleshoot input is avoiding the wetland, not avoiding the full restored floodplain. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Right, I'll send it back your way.
I'm good, thank you.
I actually don't have.
Oh, I said, right. You weren't here before.
Did I answer the second?
I knew you were here.
No,
You don't get a question.
Yeah.
Did I answer the second part of that question? I just want to make sure I did.
Yes, yeah, you
You did.
incorporated it,
Okay,
absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a question, but now I just jokingly, oh, I know what it is. So, so it's clear, understood, like differentiation between this, thank you for putting this slide up, and understood the wetland boundary is not 100% accurate. But there are different designations on that versus a floodplain. The alignment of the trail or the boardwalk on, is that west? When we're looking at page up, yes, no.
Yes,
So
west,
on the
yeah.
side of the project.
Yeah.
Is that of concern as well? I mean, like, so we're basically talking about like, well, if we add a loop trail, there are impacts on the potential restored floodplain. Are we just basically saying because we want the gathering space on the north side of the site, therefore it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to have that path and make that implication on the creek alignment and the floodplain, or is it of less concern environmentally? Does that make sense?
Yes, so the creek alignment was chosen mostly based on considerations of what was best for the creek. Like within the very, like the site has a lot of constraints, right? The private property on either side is a constraint for the creek, like what we can do. And then needing to really not make flooding worse on the east properties was a constraint for what we can do with the creek. But so and then the King County sewer main underground was a constraint, and the culvert's a constraint. I haven't really touched on the culvert. But anyway, so within all those constraints, we chose the creek alignment to optimize the creek and floodplain restoration potential on the site. And then after that, we considered, like, given the priorities of the community, how can we create some public access in the site around that? So, anytime that you're building anything in an environmentally critical area, you are impacting it. And I mean, we have these designations so that we can, as humans, like maybe start to impact them a little bit less or not at all. But I guess it's a compromise here in this case. Like this is a community that really lacks this kind of access to green space. There are several parks in the vicinity. One is all entirely concrete. It's at the corner of 15th and 125th. Not 15th. Yes, 15th. It's at the corner of Lake City Way and 125th. It's all concrete, right? And that's a park for them. And then there are two other parks. One is right next to the community center that burned down recently. And I don't really know. It's just a little kind of park with a playground amenities. And I actually don't really know what the status of that right now is, if people are able to use it, given that the community center is burned or not. But it's, it's great for kids, but it doesn't have a lot of nature immersion. And then there's another park that has more space, but again, is more of a traditional park with amenities for kids, like a playground. And I think there might be a skate park in it and stuff like that again, but not all in nature immersion. So this is going to be really special for this community. And this kind of a nature immersion is really important to human health and well-being. We know that trees and green space improve health outcomes and mental health outcomes. So I guess the best thing for the creek would not be to allow people to go into the site, but the best thing for the community is to allow people to go into the site. So we have to really kind of hold both of those things and make the best decisions for each that we can. So yes, there will still be impact with our development on the west, but we are really trying to minimize that and still maximize our creek function. And I think we're actually doing a good job. I know Dave's got his hand raised. He's going to say something much more concise and elegant than I am. Go ahead, Dave.
No, you're doing great, Tracy. I agree with everything you said. I would add to that, so far, the comments from the Muckleshoot tribe and from state agencies that have jurisdiction over this, they focused on the wetland that's on the east border and there were not any concerns that they raised about the crossing over the creek. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, the bridge is much higher and it's crossing the creek it's perpendicular. So it's not, it's a very small crossing over the creek. Whereas the path that to make the original bigger loop, we needed a path that went right through the middle of the wetland and covered quite a bit of it. And it was also low and sat down on top of it. I also think because they didn't raise it, we didn't have to give this argument. But I think if we did have pushback on the creek crossing, just from an ecological management standpoint, SPU needs and parks need some kind of a crossing to be able to do vegetation management and floodplain management on the far side of the creek. So I think setting aside, there's multiple arguments for building in the bridge in a way that we didn't have those arguments for the wetland.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then all of the infrastructure on the south side of the creek will be either concrete pathways or boardwalk that will be, this park is not required to be ADA compliant because we are not able to provide ADA parking spaces, but it is super important to our project team that it is accessible. And so while we might not always meet exact ADA requirements, we are going to do it when we can, and then otherwise be really concerned about accessibility issues. So everything that is at the south part of the park should be accessible for people of all kind of mobility abilities. And then after the bridge crossing, the trail will go down to grade. And that's when things will become maybe a little bit less ADA compliant, but still accessible. And then back to the north gathering area, which will be crushed gravel. So we're trying not, even though we're having access to the back of the site, we're really trying to have it not be built, but rather on the earthen.
And we're right at noon.
Just staying on this topic for a minute, this might be a really hard question to answer because you're getting inside other people's heads. We've done a lot of community outreach here. I mean, I totally understand the tension between public access and preserving wildlife and wetland and all that enhancement. So do you think people understand that
Oh, yes. I
mean, 'cause
really
that's-
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the very beginning, I was really, it was apparent to me how much these community members care about the creek and want it to be healthy, and how much they were considering it when they were thinking about what they wanted. So I do think that they will understand these trade-offs. And I think that they will be very grateful for the space and being able to access it. And I don't think that they will, I don't anticipate that we'll have problems with people wishing that there were more.
So I had another question, but Brian, it sounds like you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I just have a piggyback on that. The community is one aspect, the immediate neighbors is another aspect.
Yeah.
Are we concerned at all that the immediate neighbors are gonna throw up fences, and how does that change the adjacencies and where the trails are and such?
Yeah, that's a good question. There already are fences around the private properties, and I think that some of them are actually on the parks owned site, and those will be taken down because Parks doesn't fence their sites. But I anticipate that some property owners will either maintain the fence that they own or may put up a fence. And that is one of the things that constrains, our ability to provide, access and easements that the property owners just don't want that. The design is all kind of within our own project site. So if a neighbor puts up a fence, it will not impact our design. And we were really, even when we were considering an east boardwalk and trail, we were very mindful about how close it was to the property line. And we're really thinking about things that we can do to do natural screening, like how we can use plants to provide natural screening, and to maybe encourage people to stay on the trail and away from those private properties. Like people are less inclined to walk through like maybe native roses that are prickly than they would be to try to walk through like ferns that are low to the ground and easy to get through. So we're thinking about things like that.
That's plenty, thank you.
Yes.
And then just one more quick question on a totally different topic. I noted on the 125th corridor improvements.
Yes.
That there's a protected bike lane.
Yes.
Which is great. Is there
Yes.
bike parking incorporated into the
yes.
gathering area?
People really wanted to see a bike rack. That was like I think it was like one of our most frequently mentioned park ideas. So I think we will put something at the front of the park. Yeah, there you go. You can see how it was this.
So I'll have a comment about that, but I will defer to that later. So
Yeah.
those were the only questions I had. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different philosophies at play. One that treats nature as something we observe quietly and respectfully from the distance, and another that invites us to engage more directly through access and education. So my question is, what kind of relationship with nature is this project trying to promote, and what environmental ethics is at the heart of that vision?
That's a good question. I do not think that I don't know that we've had that explicit conversation on the project team, but I would say that the direction that it has gone does not treat nature like a museum. I mean, one thing that Parks and SVU could have decided was that we would just put an overview up on 125th so people could look into the site but not access it. And that was not ever a consideration. It was very important always that the community have access to the site. So I would say that this project is tending much more in the direction of wanting people to be able to engage with nature in a respectful way.
Okay, so like an ecocentric stewardship. My second question is switching topics a little. I saw that Indigenous imagery and cultural motifs were used for inspiration. So I was wondering if there was engagement with tribal groups about that.
About that.
For the inspiration board, there was some Indigenous art on there.
And you're asking if our landscape architect talked to tribal members about that specific imagery?
That and like the future of the design, if it does incorporate that, has there been communications?
I don't know if she, I don't know if she talked to them about that imagery in particular. I know because we have had lots of conversations that our landscape architect is very mindful of the fact that we will not be using tribal imagery without coordination with the tribes. And so there, right now, there is nothing that we are not appropriating anything from tribal culture and including it as a design element. And we would not do that unless we were consulting with tribes and they wanted us to. So any nature elements that will be in the park will be nature elements that are kind of common and are not associated at all with tribal art. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
To that, we're in ongoing conversations with Office of Arts and Culture about whether or not we're going to have custom art through the 1% for Art program within the park. There's likely to be something up at the street level that's part of the 125th corridor project. And it seems like a good opportunity to have art down in the site also. And so they have talked about potential for reaching out to Native artists as part of that process if we have a 1% for Arts project. But the final outcome of that isn't decided yet. But I would reiterate what Tracy said. We're not going to use tribal art motifs if it is not a Native artist that's designing that work.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So these may be quick. I know that you mentioned that from some of the prior commission comments, you did have materials queued up. So there are a couple I wanted to make sure that we focus on. So the first one is visual access into and through the site from a safety perspective. Do you have a diagram that speaks to that?
I don't know if we have a specific one, but let me see if. Let me pull this one up here. No, I think I don't have a great diagram that speaks to sightlines and what exactly will happen. I think maybe in part because it will depend on the exact planting plan, which is still just at 60% and I think is evolving. Like right now, actually, we just have, I think, it's shown that bushes and shrubs and like lower growing vegetation would be planted right along the creek bed. And I think we're considering like, that's great for sightlines, but it's not great for the creek. So I think we're still discussing about where, if we can plant a few more trees, where will they be to still maintain sightlines? It is an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thank you. One other was, so there was a comment last time about safety being enhanced through size and scale of circulation as well as site lighting. We covered the size of circulation passageways. Do you have any more information about site lighting?
There will be no lighting in the site. In part because I don't know why. There's Dave and SPU and Parks team. Do you remember why we made that decision?
There's existing streetlights in front of the property along 125th. Currently, I think there was discussions about in the kind of main entry plaza right off 25th, having some additional lighting, but so far internally, our departments haven't discussed it being a good idea to light the back of the site. And a lot of it has to do with the neighboring properties and park use or, nature area use hours and environmental habitat lighting and all that. So I think we could still entertain some low-level lighting in some way, but I think internally our departments have pushed back against it so far.
Okay, and then the next one would be, so one thing we talked about last time was the potential for phasing for site improvements related to culvert installation. Can you update us about those conversations around culvert timeline as well as future compatibility, no matter the timeline, with plans for the culvert?
I'm happy to take this one unless you, Dave, would like to from SPU's perspective.
Let's Maya, you want to take a shot at this? You're kind of the culvert expert here.
That's very kind of you to say. So SPU is going through the Thornton Creek watershed and is starting a project to kind of inventory and prioritize kind of all of our culverts in light of the culvert case and our regulatory pressures to replace fish barriers, culverts in this case. And this culvert particularly, like Tracy mentioned earlier in this talk, is upstream of many other culverts. And so when we're thinking about the prioritization in terms of capital projects, this particular culvert falls pretty low on the priority list because there are so many downstream barriers that need to be addressed first. And the asset itself, the culvert itself, is in fairly good condition. It's not at risk of kind of falling apart at any point soon. However, it's something that we are thinking about. It's something that, you know, for the longevity of this project, when we're working with our floodplain modelers, we are also thinking about making sure that we're modeling for conditions when that culvert is removed, and we have a higher flow through. What will that do to the park? Making sure that the design decisions we're making now are kind of incorporating any future changes in regards to that culvert. Does that answer your question?
What's the timeline for that component of the work for ensuring that it will meet future needs?
The timeline for when we think we'll replace that culvert?
No, so you mentioned the component of the work of ensuring that this area is sized correctly for the long term when the culvert ideally is removed in sequence. That work has already occurred, or that work is to occur in the future?
It's currently, it has gone into the placement of the creek alignment already, and we're doing that modeling work continuously as we're finishing the final design, and thinking about, you know, like Tracy mentioned, if there's going to be a creek, if there's going to be a path close to the creek, if not, where that loop is exactly, if there is a loop, making sure that we're incorporating when that culvert does come out.
So,
Okay,
so
great.
like Maya said, like that work has been ongoing throughout the life cycle of the project. We can't design the creek without thinking about what will happen when the culvert is removed. So it has been a consideration the whole time. And some of the things that affect that are like what exactly the floodplain grading looks like that will be adjusted based on knowledge that the culvert will be removed. And then we also are thinking that once it is, we may need to put in additional wood or other kind of things that create some hydrologic control. The way that the culvert currently is it is a major hydrologic control feature. So when we take it out, we're aware that we might need to create a more natural one in that place. But the culvert is undersized, so having it come out ultimately will be a good thing for the creek, and we're making sure that when it comes out, that what we're doing here will work with that. Another thing that we're addressing it is that we're not putting any hard infrastructure in that east part of the park, so that there's nothing that will have to be destroyed when the culvert comes out. We're not planting any native conifers. All our planting over there will be bushes and ground covers and such that, like, you know, it's heart-wrenching. We don't want to take out a tree that's had 10 years, 15 years to grow, but taking out a few ferns that are kind of more easily replaceable is a strategy that we feel better about. So that's the other thing. And then we're also being very mindful about the kind of where the hardscape is on the other side and the west part of the site, and trying to make sure that we would have minimal disturbances to that when the culvert comes out.
Great, thank you so much. I'll pass it along.
All my questions were asked.
Yeah, one of the most thoughtful presentations I've seen in a long time, Tracy, so thank you very much to you and your team. I'm done.
Okay. So I think we can move on to deliberation, and I agree, it was really a very helpful presentation, and it answered so many of the questions that came in to today, have, you know, coming, you know, that we wanted to kind of share with you. So I think a lot of it's answered. I think we'll just go through, we've categorized it basically what we did last time with the design commission, you know, the previous commission. So I think we'll just kind of take on the topics, and we'll probably move through these quickly, everyone, but just looking at access and safety and, you know, the ramifications thereof of the current design, that being circulation, you know, the width of the path, dead ends, sightlines, decision points, looking at the overall design of the project, just thinking about the form language, how the design is articulated, how the design is supporting the design intent, you know, for the creek and restoration of floodplain, response to community engagement and art integration, which we heard another question, but, you know, we heard that that's in process, that perhaps we have recommendations for that. And then looking at phasing and kind of planning for the future, which again, we just kind of delved into, but kind of wrap that up with a bow. So we can start on access and safety, whoever wants. Good. Anyone?
Well, I'll pipe in. I do think, I'm not quite sure how we can weigh in on this, but it seems to me if one can address the question of not touching to the degree possible the wetlands themselves, as opposed to the floodplain, there is an opportunity for loop, which from many perspectives in the process, as well as our own perspective, does improve the safety of the experience. So I'd certainly like to deliberate with the rest of the on you know, whether that's one could find oneself actually recommending a loop.
And Phoebe, can I just bring kind of a high level point of conversation before the individual topics?
Sure.
I agree with what I've heard already from other commissioners about this being a very informative presentation and clear to some of the goals that are set forward. I'm feeling that this is it's an incredible 30% design conversation. Like, it really feels like a perfect 30% design presentation. And I acknowledge that this project was moving forward, was kind of put down for a moment, is being picked back up. I really appreciate that that's happening. I really appreciate the kind of the continuation of some of the concerns that came up, the broader community engagement after this came before us, the much deeper coordination with SDOT, with the Office of Arts and Culture. There's a lot of things that have really moved forward, but I'm not clear that what we're seeing is 60% design in terms of the kind of the questions that we answer at 60% design. So I just want to ground our conversation in asking you all how we want to talk about it.
That's a fair question. I think that's actually something we talked about the other day when we were looking at, you know, coming into today's meeting. I've been sort of thinking about it, so I'll just kind of forward it now to say, you know, is it perhaps if it isn't at 60% design, is it something that we're saying come back to the table, or is it like a strong recommendation right now already for a subcommittee, you know, to kind of bridge that gap, because we already haven't, you know, it has been so long since we've seen it. And yeah, there are, you know, kind of materiality questions and design decisions that haven't really been, they're not really clear in that way.
Well, it seems that the team is still grappling with a diagrammatic look at what a return looks like. And I think once the realities of that decision making, I think we should see it again. So knowing that, I think that's what should be informing some of the comments.
And Well, I'm really glad you brought this up, because I was thinking, so like, usually at 60% design, you're in a detail of finishing an alternative that's been fully developed. And that's kind of not where we are here. And I think there's good reasons for that. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's very good reasons for that. So I think, how do we want to proceed? Is this a subcommittee topic? I think it seems like a logical one, but really drilling down on this. Because I think everybody wants the public access and the wetland enhancement. And then the question is, how do you do both so that it's safe, so that people will use it and feel comfortable using it? And we're just not, to your point, right, we're not really quite there yet, and I think we need to get there.
Yeah, we haven't talked bridge or
Right.
handrails or boardwalk or
Yeah.
any of those things.
Right.
Just general path.
Yeah. And it's not a criticism. I mean,
No,
these are this is a tough design question, but I think we feel more comfortable approving something at 60% design with.
More specific.
Yeah, with a very clear next.
Exactly. I would like to see bike parking incorporated. I'll just throw that in. People on bikes won't use this if there's not a safe place to park their bike. So it's just, that would be, I think, a hopefully easy.
So are you all saying at this point, you just want to get a slate of recommendations for them to proceed with?
I think that sort of
I
makes
think that
sense.
makes sense.
I mean, also I was gonna say, being through processes of the 60% ProView tech. I know that's a different set of documents, but just speaking to SPR a little bit, like, I'm surprised, it doesn't really feel like a 60% from what I know of that process. And I think it would just behoove the project to be able to kind of make sure to flush out those things.
Yeah, and Tracy may be able to speak to this better, coordinating with Wendy and everyone, but I think there was some discrepancy through this whole process about what we were presenting. Because yes, we're not showing you what the 60%
Right, you're not showing
really
us the
look
black and
like.
white.
So, no, I mean, I agree. I think we kind of, at some point, we're saying we were presenting to you all at a certain phase when it's really was a different phase. And I think we caught that, and Wendy caught that at some point. So I think we're trying to reconcile.
And do you ever re-vote, I guess is my question, for 30%? Because
No.
30% we had approvals and no's.
We don't want to go back and,
Yeah.
do that. So I think at this point, it's saying, being clear about what you think should be advanced based upon what we know, and a very fundamental piece, which is a diagrammatic look at a loop and input that you can provide to help inform its location, its attributes, and what the goal is of what it's trying to accomplish, because in full disclosure, that was a very important point that the commission, I think, was talking about, is what is the relative merit of going down to that loop? And I think the answer was clear. The merit is that the public wants that. They want that experience. The team wants that experience. So if that is the experience that everyone agrees to, how is that safe, secure, and realistic? So I'll be fine.
Well.
There we are.
So how do we want to, just like, what's
I think
kind of the
it's a
next?
slate of recommendations
Yeah.
about what you would like to see at this point, in terms of, I think, some of the key moves that we've seen.
Mhm.
I think, in particular, the diagrammatic or advancing beyond diagrammatic and specific concept solutions for that loop.
So shall.
Does that
Yeah.
seem reasonable?
I think it totally sounds reasonable. I'm just wondering, shall I take a stab at it and people? Kind of pipe in?
Yeah, if you're ready to do that, I think that's a good idea.
There's a whole aspect of all of the details, right? Like.
Yes, yeah.
And that goes to subcommittee and not back to the general group.
I think it should go to a subcommittee to unpack what were the solutions and then come back for a final look.
I think the recommendations help form what the subcommittee discussion can be about.
Yeah.
Ray, what did you want?
Oh, it's just in the process of like whether they have anything they wanted to say, because there was a strategy for permitting. So that they were gonna get more response for permitting and how we did that, or maybe that's obvious.
Yeah, I think I'll add that in. That's a good feedback. Okay, so I'll just start kind of going through what seems kind of high level recommendations. This is all, so this is kind of summary and recommendations all together. And again, with the appreciation of like what this project is trying to do, we greatly are in support of it, and just want to see the best for the community and for the creek itself. And just to note, love the way you talk about the creek is the primary stakeholder, right? That everything that's the core project, and that's really kind of informing everything. So kind of with that in mind, if the creek is first and the community and their aspirations and needs are a close second or a corollary mutual beneficial relationship, some of those recommendations are that first and foremost, I think it's the loop. I did see that one diagram where there's kind of this diagrammatic diagram, but there's actually a permitting drawing that I think, could you put that up really quickly, Tracy?
Yeah. Even the planting plans.
The
seem to
planting
show
plan
that.
showed it, yeah. You know, and that shows actually a more robust, I think, loop strategy, which actually really delves that farther into the floodplain and closer to the creek. I'm not sure. So we would love to see that study of the loops, how you're ending up with that, with the understanding that 100% it cannot be in the wetland or in the wetland buffer, right? So we're understanding it as a floodplain loop and not a wetland loop. But we want to see that study. And again, like Ray just said, the acknowledgement or understanding of what can be permitted. So we understand this has gone in for permitting and what is actually allowable, because then of course that helps us help you understand the best way to move that forward and if it can be moved forward at all. I'll move on to planting. I think this was the planting plan you shared. We'd love to see understood native species. We'd love to see the native species, you know, understand it's native species, and thank you for sharing the strategy of not having the, you know, trees, for instance, at the culvert for phasing opportunities, but a more robust explanation and detail of what plant species you're using and where, and it can be broad brush, right? Like right now we're seeing actually plant symbols, and it could be something that gives swaths of where you expect lower plants, where the punctuation of higher plant is. And that's one, to understand the planting intent and design intent, but two, to understand sightlines throughout the site. So that would be, again, I think a helpful bit of your process as well. To that point about sightlines, Molly asked for a diagram previously, so we're not kind of seeing, I think what we're getting such a great, I think, overall understanding and process presentation from you, but it's not necessarily being shown, I think, in the actual graphics and diagrams that you're sharing, right? We're not kind of seeing how all of these pieces work together. So kind of clear understanding the sightline diagrams of the sightlines diagrammatically. I think that would also help if we start to key in. I noticed that there's sort of three gathering areas. There's an entry plaza at the south, then there's the intermediate overlook, which I don't feel like is actually really talked about or represented, and then there's the deep gathering space. So even kind of understanding that gradient of kind of like the interior, the exterior of the site to the interior, and how you're kind of visually moving through the site. And again, that can also feel for safety, like using that intermediate overlook point as a place where you can have a decision point or kind of see what's ahead of you. So perhaps more renderings or perspectives. I know that those can be onerous, but having a couple more views to really help us understand that maybe they're not so fuzzy, but how people are kind of moving through the site and what those views into the site and what is in front of you would be helpful.
I'd say the complexity of this is not just in plan, it's in elevation change. So even sections, if we're not going
Actually,
full
absolutely, yeah.
render
Yes.
a section,
Yeah, actually, we talked about section the other day too, exactly, that, you know, if it's not a perspective rendering, a section would also really help us understand what that does, yeah, that,
Elevation change.
exactly, right, the topography is so critical to the site. You are entering into a bowl, which makes it dynamic and exciting, that how you kind of see that visually, represented. Also for the subcommittee would be more understanding of the details, because it is a simple project, you know, it is not simple in the complexity of the creek restoration, but in terms of like the actual built design is relatively simple. So making sure that that built design is, that we understand the materiality. You kind of touched on that today. It's hardscape concrete on the south side, transition to boardwalk. You know, you're on the ground on the north side, but there's a way of thinking about that gradient of materiality and how the details and the elegance of those details can really help bring that forward as a beautiful design. So we would like to start to understand where there are handrails, how those handrails are articulated, what the edge conditions are like, especially when we're talking about bridges and boardwalks, all of those elements.
I think there's gonna be retaining walls and things.
Retaining walls.
Back and forth.
Yeah, and how they all complement each other.
And thinking about site lighting in combination with that, acknowledging some of the concerns about surrounding neighbors, but really thinking through while looking at the view sheds in open space, and working out details, understanding where site lighting is, what kind of lighting levels are the team's goal, and whether there are any more subtle lighting solutions that are considered.
Do you have anything else for my?
I just wanted to make a general comment, just kind of at a higher level, that one of the things the commission almost always asks for is interdepartmental and interagency coordination. So I just wanted kudos to the team for really doing that well on this project. I mean, that, you know, Tracy, I really liked your diagram at the beginning about how you and all the agencies are working together. So I think it's worth noting that because it's something we always want to see and we are seeing on this project. So I think I just always wanted to add a comment, but
absolutely, yeah.
One thing that I think we already talked about, the elevation change and diagrams related to that. One thing that was a little bit unclear to me was the accessibility. Like I know when we get to the north, you've mentioned, Tracy, that's going to get a little bit challenging, but does that mean we're having stairs? Does that mean it's steep? I think if we can kind of get an understanding of how far it's actually accessible, and if there are challenges, how are you guys kind of responding to that would be great. And again, I just wanted to say I really appreciate all the community engagement you've done in terms of language, age gap, like all the stuff was great. Thank you so much.
I think one thing we would often also see at kind of 60% level is sort of, you know, signage or educational components. I think so much of what we're talking about today is sort of the ambiguity of what this space is, like, you know, as between kind of halfway between a park and a natural area. And I think just sort of explaining that to the public, you know, I'm sure that will come in later design phases. There's always the kind of signs and plaques and whatever, but I think just kind of having a recommendation to kind of be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, and as we know, the 1% is coming in. There's conversations about how that could be at the street front, but also within the site. So how you're leveraging that as part of that kind of wayfinding and signage and experiential.
Yeah, because when you arrive at these places, you kind of don't know how to use them in a way, you know, like they're not parks. So I think that would be kind of an interesting component as the design gets resolved to sort of explain that.
Great. Is there anything else? I think we usually ask. I think we're really at time. Thanks for staying over. Was there anything else that the design team wanted us to hear or that we misunderstood before we go to vote? Yeah. So I'll take a motion. A motion to to vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
I second. Do we have to do that?
We have to say vote on that. Oh, vote on. Thank you. Sorry. It's always like slightly different. Make a motion to vote on the approval of the 60% design, this phase.
Yes. Because I think that was the question you said, is this 60%?
Right.
It's being represented as 60%, but it may, so maybe saying, voting on the phase of design that you reviewed today.
Sure, that sounds great. So.
This subcommittee condition.
Yeah.
I will, yes, I will say that too. Sorry, just forget. So. Can I have a motion to vote on the design that we've seen as it is shown today at this particular phase? We have expressed reservation that it's not what we usually consider as 60%. So we have given a list of recommendations that therefore is also tied to a mandatory, let's say, subcommittee where the rest of this information proliferates before you come back in to the full design commission.
That sounds great.
Okay,
So is that a motion or?
and that's my motion.
I second.
Yes, thank you.
That's a good motion.
I approve with the catch-up condition of the subcommittee.
Great.
Same.
I approve with the condition of
As do I, and I think I will just say really quickly that, yeah, so the subcommittee on this one, I think is a robust. subcommittee.
Yes, yeah. And Tracy, I just want to again say thank you so much, and to the design team. Your project team, very, very, very helpful. It answered so many questions that we were kind of wringing our hands over, and we really appreciate that kind of work because it was very, very helpful for us. So thank you very much. And thanks, Dave, Maya, a really very, very, very helpful job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you.
with that, we are, there's nothing else. I think we're done for the day today. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I think we're done.